Powered by a huge Thiokol rocket engine, the X-15 climbs higher than any plane before it. At speeds of up to 6.5 times the speed of sound. Reaching into space, the X-15 expands the bounds of aviation, setting the stage for the space program. On September 17, 1959, test pilot Scott Crossfield would complete the first flight of a research program that would see North American aviation's X-15 carry man higher and faster than any aircraft had gone before.
It was one of the best flying of the research airplanes since the X-1, and I always maintained because the X-1 and the X-15 were designed mostly by pilots.
Its success would not only rely on its design, but also its experimental predecessors, which through both achievement and failure had yielded valuable lessons. The Bell X-2 furnished designers invaluable data about flying at extremely high speeds and altitudes. In May 1956, Frank Pete Everest took the X-2 to almost Mach 3, and 4 months later, Ivan Kinchlow would soar to a record altitude of 126,000 feet. These X-2 flights revealed the effects of searing heat encountered in the so-called thermal thicket. But perhaps the X-2's greatest lesson would be learned through tragedy. On the X-2's final flight, Captain Mel Abt encountered a stability problem as he flew past Mach 3. He found himself out of control and could not recover. Data from this fateful flight would provide a key to the X-15's development. The emergence of larger rocket engines capable of 60,000 pounds of thrust was also crucial to the development of the X-15.
In my view, we invented that thing on a fishing trip on the back of an envelope. In 1951, Walt Williams and I and 2 other people from NACA were driving back late at night from a fishing trip, and we heard that a 75,000-pound thrust rocket engine, the Viking engine, had fired successfully at Santa Susana. And of course, the immediate question that crossed my mind and Walt Williams was that, boy, wouldn't that be something to have a manned airplane with that kind of thrust on it? So I literally got a piece of paper on the back of an envelope out of his glove compartment. We made some crude calculations, and really that was, to my way of thinking, the beginning of my participation anyway in the X-15 program.
Development of the X-15 would entail extensive use of wind tunnel testing. Heat testing was used to isolate materials capable of withstanding the thermal extremes of hypersonic speed, over 5 times the speed of sound, and re-entry into the upper atmosphere, both goals of the X-15 program. Wind tunnels enabled engineers to simulate the stress imposed on the plane's structures. They could also test the viability of a safe drop from a B-52 wing. In the end, some 4,000 hours in 13 wind tunnels had been logged. Research into the flight characteristics of the early X-15 design was carried out using a radio-controlled model with a built-in camera to monitor stability instrumentation during flight. The question of pilot survivability was addressed. Lightweight nylon pressure suits were designed to allow more freedom of movement while still protecting the pilot if he needed to eject. This rocket sled was an attempt to simulate stress on the pressure suit during an ejection. Propelled by a ballistic rocket, the X-15's ejection seat had been successfully tested at Edwards prior to installation. However, its practicality became a point of contention.
Very expensive, very heavy, and very complicated, though, to get a man to escape from a vehicle like that. In a research airplane, I would be inclined to say just offer enough money that the pilot would accept it and go without compromising the airplane with all the complexity of the bleeding hearts wailing that you might lose an aviator. I'm not going to say I want to lose aviators, but it's a risky business.
Risky indeed. However, the government felt those risks were unacceptable, and the seats would eventually be installed in all 3 X-15s. In late 1957, construction of the X-15 airframe began at North American Aviation. The aircraft consisted of a titanium and stainless steel structure covered with a lightweight, heat-resistant outer skin called Inconel X, which would provide protection at over 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. By this time, Scott Crossfield had left the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics to join North American at their Los Angeles facility. There, he took part in ground simulator programs which used a working X-15 cockpit with the actual hydraulic control systems. Crossfield's vast experience with earlier experimental aircraft enabled him to give valuable insights which led to major improvements in the design. While construction of the airframe continued, several test pilots underwent a human centrifuge program to simulate the dynamic forces that the body was subjected to during the massive acceleration. The first X-15 was rolled out on October 15, 1958. With Cold War anxiety at an all-time high, Vice President Nixon assured the crowd that the X-15 would regain America's lead in space. The Mojave Desert. This vast expanse of parched earth would become the home of all 3 X-15s. On June 8, 1959, after repeated problems that had kept the first X-15 grounded, Scott Crossfield broke free from the B-52 mothership, taking the aircraft on its first unpowered glide flight.
Looks pretty good here. I'm at 36,000.
Crossfield was to pilot the first series of proving flights for North American before the plane would be turned over to the Air Force. At age 38, he was one of America's most seasoned test pilots, and on this maiden glide flight, his experience would be put to the test. On the approach to landing, it was apparent that something was wrong. When Crossfield attempted to correct a stability problem, the aircraft began to porpoise uncontrollably. Landing would mean precise timing so that the fuselage would point upward when the skids made contact. Crossfield timed it right, avoiding a potential disaster. As it turned out, the systems that controlled the plane's movements had simply been set at too sensitive a level.
I was baffled. I could not understand, because I'm an aerodynamicist. I went to how the airplane could be statically unstable, and yet everything it showed me was that it was. But it was really a simple fix, and we never had that problem again.
Now it was time for the powered flights. Temporarily, the program would use 2 less powerful XLR-11 rocket engines built by reaction motors. Development of Thiokol's powerful XLR-99 engine was lagging a year behind schedule. September 17, 1959. The first powered flight.
Beginning to come around.
After ignition, the X-15 streaked skyward over Edwards, leaving the chase planes far behind. Even with the air brakes fully extended, X-15 number 2 cruised easily to Mach 2, 1/3 the way to the program's goal of Mach 6. On gliding back to base, the pilot needed to perform a unique function. The ventral tail needed to be jettisoned for landing.
Yes,
lower vertical that made it a symmetrical cruciform, really, a tail configuration, was jettisonable because it stuck below the landing gear. We used to joke it'd be the fastest plow in history if we left it on there.
Gear is coming down, and it looks good.
The success of the flight ended with a flawless landing. But the third flight would not go as smoothly.
On the third flight, a problem that had been with those little LR-11 engines for probably 20 years finally decided to get its act together, and we blew up one engine, and it blew the back end out of the airplane.
The drop from the B-52 was clean. Crossfield ignited the engines and began to pull away, while a series of ground stations monitored. It was a chase plane that noticed a fire at the rear of the aircraft and informed Crossfield, who shut down the engines and jettisoned the fuel. But the diving aircraft was angled downwards. Fuel in the front tanks could not escape, making the forward section heavier than the rear. The fuselage could not take the added stress of the forward weight and broke apart on landing. A small gas regulator valve, not engine problems, had caused the fire. Luckily, the fuselage split between the fuel tanks and the cockpit, leaving Crossfield unharmed.
So we fixed that very easily, and nothing wrong with the airplane. It broke right where it was supposed to. I mean, with the loads it was supposed to.
Back at the North American plant, the X-15 No. 2 underwent extensive repair and modification. The setback was underscored by recent Soviet successes in space. The pressure was on to get a man into space and back. June 1960. The big engine was ready. For Scott Crossfield, this test would be a lonely experience.
I was just wearing a business suit. It's kind of interesting. You know, I get in the airplane and everybody else gets in a blockhouse. That's called building the confidence of the pilot. No, you look out and the whole landscape is vacated. There's nothing alive out there. You know, they're all hiding under concrete walls.
On this day, the protective concrete walls would be needed. As Crossfield reset the throttle, the dangers of these new technologies became apparent. The brand new X-15 No. 3 had been ripped apart, the cockpit blown almost 40 feet forward with Crossfield still inside. He survived, thanks partly to his own contribution in designing a cockpit capable of withstanding such punishment. However, the explosion was not the engine. A faulty valve had caused the liquid oxygen tank to overpressurize and explode. While crews were picking up the pieces of the X-15 No. 3, the first X-15, now in the hands of NASA and their test pilot Joe Walker, was setting new speed records without the bigger engine. On August 9, 1960, he broke through to Mach 3.31, making him the fastest man alive. But in the X-15 program, records were short-lived, leaving Walker little time to bask in his success. Just 8 days later, new heights would be the goal as Air Force Captain Bob White closed in on space, taking the X-15 to a record altitude of over 136,000 feet. White's record would also be fleeting as the X-15 continued to go higher and faster. Pre-flight anxiety prevailed before each of the tests over Edwards. Everyone in the program knew the risks involved, and for Crossfield, the memory of the ground-run explosion served as a reminder of the dangers and uncertainty that greeted each test flight. This B-52 launch plane is on display at the Pima Air Museum in Arizona. It was the ideal launch aircraft because of its massive lifting power. Modification of one wing was necessary, as launch plane pilot Fitz Fulton explains.
The X-15 weighed as much as 50,000 pounds under some conditions. So we had that hard point on the right-hand side, and in order to do that, we had to deactivate one of the fuel tanks. So one of the main fuel tanks was deactivated. And another thing was that the X-15 is quite long and has a vertical fin, so the trailing edge of the B-52 wing had to be cut away.
It was necessary for the X-15 to be air-launched because of its limited fuel capacity. During a typical test run, the X-15 would consume all of its 9 tons of fuel in less than 2 minutes, ruling out a conventional takeoff. With the X-15 attached, the B-52's 8 powerful engines would be pulling a total load weighing in excess of 150 tons. The takeoff was especially long because the B-52's wing flaps were immobilized as a result of the cutaway modifications. It would take over 45 minutes for the B-52 to reach the launch altitude of 45,000 feet. Unlike the launch procedure of earlier X-planes, the X-15 pilot himself would carry out the mid-air separation, which could be clearly felt from the B-52.
That airplane, when you let it go, it felt like a gigantic bomb, because it was the thump as it let go, and there would be a structural response to the B-52 that was fed back in. The wing would flop just a little bit, but nothing that was we felt any concern about. But and the B-52 would roll away from where the X-15 had dropped, so it just took you a few seconds to recover, but there was no question that he had left you.
Now unleashed, the powerful X-15 was free to display its awesome capabilities. Colonel Harry Andonian recalls.
It was quite exhilarating to hear all that roaring out under your wing and then look out to the right side there and watch him virtually going straight up. You could hear the rocket engine inside the B-52.
This was the first flight with the large XLR-99 engine, which proved as powerful as its expectations. With the air brakes fully extended and the engine idling lazily, Scott Crossfield could barely restrain the aircraft to under Mach 3. The X-15 was now as its designers had planned, equipped with the engine that would take it to record speeds.
You really knew you had an engine behind you. There's 5 Gs of thrust when that thing burned out. That burnout weight, it weighed 13,000 pounds and 60,000 pounds of thrust. That's a pretty good boost. That's better than any dragster will give you.
Performance had been better than expected. And now the ambitious goals of the X-15 program were not only attainable, but could perhaps be exceeded. Post-flight, Scott Crossfield was outspoken in his belief that the X-15's potential had been underestimated.
And I got a little faster today than we'd planned, and we have on our previous flights, and my flights, gotten faster than we'd planned, because for once in history, we've overestimated the drag on the airplane. I think it'll exceed its original expectation.
As the X-15 inched closer and closer towards its goal, the opportunity for America to regain the lead in the space race fueled media hype, and a mood of excitement grew throughout the country. This was to be Crossfield's final X-15 flight. There were suggestions he would be tempted to push the aircraft to new limits.
I wasn't about to go playing around in a region that we didn't carefully prepare to go into with a brand new expensive airplane. As I say, I'd fire a pilot that would do that. Just, you can't afford that kind of self-indulgence.
December 1960, time to turn the X-15 over to NASA. A disappointed Scott Crossfield must leave the program that he'd been such an integral part of. A courageous new generation of test pilots would ride the X-15 to the limits of speed and the reaches of space, higher and faster than any before. The pursuit of in-flight stability prompts designers to experiment with a forward-swept wing. The success of the HansaJet proves the concept works. But the X-29 takes the idea further and revolutionizes aviation design. Tonight, trace the legacy of the Great Sweep Forward. The Grumman X-29. This strangely shaped aircraft, with its unorthodox forward-swept wing configuration, would push beyond the limits of known aircraft maneuverability, leading the way towards the next generation of fighter technology. Conventional rules of stability and control would be left behind in the quest for never-before-seen agility. Forward-swept wing design can be traced back to World War II Germany. The fuselage of this Heinkel 177 bomber would be used to build a new jet bomber with a radical wing configuration. The Junkers Ju-287 used a forward-swept wing design to increase the area of its bomb bay. Despite successful test runs, it never saw combat. The forward-swept wing concept was abandoned until the early 1960s when it re-emerged in the HF-B320 HansaJet. Hans Bock, who had been involved in the Ju-287 program, used the configuration for a more benign purpose. The HansaJet was designed to provide additional space within the fuselage for greater passenger enjoyment. By using the forward-swept wing, the main section of the fuselage could remain free of obstructions, leaving more room for creature comforts. However, engineers of early forward-swept wing aircraft encountered an aerodynamic problem which kept these aircraft from attaining high speeds. They discovered that the wings could be easily overstressed and may be ripped from the plane at high-speed flight. To create a forward-swept wing that could be flown at high speeds would mean overcoming this problem, known as structural divergence. X-29 test pilot Rod Woomer explains.
When you put forward-swept wings on an airplane, as you take that airplane to faster and faster speeds, those wings are constantly trying to rip themselves off the airplane. In an aft-swept wing airplane, as you put it under load at higher airspeeds, the wings actually bend leading edge down, which relieves the load, so they're self-relieving. When the wings sweep forward, they actually twist leading edge up, which increases the loads, which puts more load on, more bending, and so the wings are trying to constantly rip themselves off the airplane.
This problem became the primary challenge of retired Air Force Colonel Norris J. Crone. In 1976, Crone took control of a Department of Defense design project that would include the creation of a high-speed, forward-swept wing aircraft. The following year, Grumman began testing a radio-controlled model made of balsa wood. With this small prototype, Grumman would have a head start for the design that was to become the X-29. The Grumman prototype reflected the earlier studies of Colonel Crone under the auspices of the U.S. Air Force, NASA, and the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Wind tunnel tests investigated the effects of structural divergence on early models. But despite all the theoretical experiments, It would be the pilots who underwent the ultimate test.
I suppose you could make an argument that test pilots were not that big a deal because the scientists and engineers had put the airplane together very well. We flew it in the we looked at it in the simulator. We went up and we flew it in flight. It looked exactly like the simulator, and so the test pilot really became somebody that validated the engineering production of the simulator model. But when we got to hang of attack, it was really a different story. It was like we stepped back a generation and rediscovered that test pilots are really needed and flying articles are really needed, and that you can't do everything with gigantic computers and wind tunnels.
But before the pilots could fly the new design, engineers needed to solve its inherent aerodynamic problem.
If you want the airplane to go fast, you have to make the wings so heavy that it's prohibitive to put it on the airplane. We solved that in the X-29 by building the wings with composite material, graphite epoxy wing covers. That makes the wings strong enough to withstand the aerodynamic loads, and yet because the graphite epoxy is much lighter in weight than aluminum or other metal materials, the wings are light enough to go on the airplane.
The use of advanced lightweight composites would be the breakthrough that would enable the forward swept wing configuration to enter the transonic realm. Although unique in its appearance, the X-29 was really a hybrid plane, borrowing elements of the F-16, the FA-18 Hornet, and the F-5A Freedom Fighter. The resulting structure was a cumulative design created in the quest for maximum maneuverability. After examining the design submitted by 3 aerospace companies, the Grumman aircraft was chosen. In September 1981, the G712 became the X-29A, and the first flight was scheduled for summer 1983. In addition to increasing maneuverability, the revolutionary forward-swept airframe encountered less air resistance or drag than its conventional aft-swept counterparts, so a smaller engine could be used.
The only purpose of the engine is really to overcome the drag and get the airplane to go where you want it to go. So if there's less drag, you can have a smaller engine. With a smaller engine, it burns up less fuel, which means you have to carry less fuel aboard the airplane. So if you're designing a paper airplane from the ground up, now you can build an airplane that's smaller, lighter weight, which means it's going to be cheaper to build and cheaper to maintain over the long run.
The prospect of a new generation aircraft, stunningly agile, fuel efficient, with low maintenance, created an air of excitement, even humor at the 1984 unveiling.
That's a beautiful model, but they got the wing on backwards.
From Grumman in New York, the X-29 was shipped through the Panama Canal to Edwards Air Force Base, California, to begin its flight test program. The time had come to take the unique X-29 into the blue Mojave Desert skies, where simulation and theory would face the harsh light of reality. On December 14, 1984, the X-29 joined the ranks of its predecessors as it set out in search of the unknown. Grumman's chief test pilot, Charles "Chuck" Sewell, was chosen to fly the first mission that would take the aircraft to 0.4 Mach and a maximum altitude of 15,000 feet. Sewell would also guide the X-29 through a series of basic aerial maneuvers to test its airworthiness. On that sunny morning, Sewell engaged the throttle, becoming the first man to fly a forward swept-wing aircraft capable of supersonic speed. It was here in the skies over Edwards that the efforts of Colonel Crone would finally be realized. The X-29 performed flawlessly, In fact, during the flight, Sewell noticed something strange. The two chase planes were gyrating helplessly in the turbulence while his flight remained relatively smooth. The elaborate flight control system designed to compensate for the aircraft's inherent lack of structural stability had actually dampened the turbulence. Grumman Chief Test Pilot Kurt Schrader.
Computers provide this stability through the commanding the flight control system. So basically the pilot doesn't have to do it. So he has the best of both worlds. He has what appears to him to be a stable airplane. In reality, the control surfaces are moving constantly and rapidly to control and provide that stability that is not there from an aerodynamic standpoint.
For the first time in aviation history, an aircraft specifically designed to minimize stability was being tested. Since the Wright brothers first took to the air, stability and control had always been paramount. But for the X-29, it was only in the way.
If you really want to have this maneuverability, then you can't afford to have a great degree of stability, because you use up a lot of what is known as control power, the ability to maneuver the airplane, just to overcome the basic stability of the airplane.
One of the primary objectives of the X-29 project was to attain extremely high angles of attack without losing control power. Each test pilot underwent months of simulator training and preparation. Many thought the simulators could accurately predict its flight characteristics, but the high angle of attack proved to be the unknown.
We flew in the simulator first. We'd fly all our cards, and you'd go fly in the simulator. Other than the fact that there was real scenery passing by, there wasn't much difference between the airplane and the simulator. But once we got the high angle of attack above about 25 degrees angle of attack, we'd fly it in the simulator first, but when we would go to fly it in the airplane, it was always different. And so you really felt like you were discovering something with the airplane.
X-plane test pilots always discovered something from their unique aircraft. But with this next generation of aircraft also comes a new generation of test pilot.
You may have needed those kind of individuals in days past to go take airplanes and do things with them when people had absolutely no idea what was going to happen. But today we're doing things that are much more exotic with airplanes. Our capabilities to predict what's going to happen are much more exotic. And in general, you find, I believe, that the test pilots and the ones that I work with are a unique combination of an intelligent engineer and a minor risk taker, you know, a sort of a cowboy, a sort of a controlled cowboy.
Despite the computers and revolutionary design of the X-29, these controlled cowboys were essential for taking the technology where the simulators couldn't go.
The airplane looks so unusual. And I thought the funny part of it is that when you get so involved in a program, that it started to look conventional to me, and the other airplanes started to look odd.
Although the plane's safety had initially been questioned, the X-29 test pilots were reassured by the plane's consistently successful test runs.
All the way up till when we initially flew the airplane, there were some people that I had a lot of respect for. Their technical capabilities were saying that the airplane was not going to be controllable. And those were the levels of concern. And it was, the airplane was breaking new ground as far as that level of instability. And so that was really the major question on the airplane, as far as a safety standpoint. And as it's turned out, it's performed flawlessly. There were areas where the airplane was predicted to do 20% better than a similar design that had an aft-swept wing, and it met those goals.
The long X-29 program has proven safe and productive. The forward swept wing configuration is certainly a shape for the future. Fueled by a desire to find alternative means of attaining super maneuverability, the first international X-plane test program formally began in February 1987. when the U.S. and Germany began joint research on the X-31A. One key to allowing this aircraft to achieve the goal set by the two nations would be these thrust vectoring paddles around the jet exhaust nozzle. These paddles are moved into the exhaust stream, deflecting the exhaust in one direction or the other. In doing this, energy provided by the engine thrust can be utilized in steering the aircraft, thereby increasing maneuverability. However, using paddles like these is not a new idea. In the 1930s, Robert Goddard had used a system of paddle-like vanes on his liquid fuel rockets. Controlled by gyroscopes, the vanes would move into the thrust stream and correct the rocket from veering off course. Benefiting from Goddard's pioneering rocket work, the German wartime V-2 missile used a similar system of vanes set in the thrust path. The vanes could withstand the thrust stream's white-hot temperatures, the twisting of the vanes steering the missile, keeping it on course. During the final months of World War II, over 3,000 V-2s were launched. During the early stages of X-29 research, engineers ran wind tunnel investigations, testing the feasibility of a vector control system designed to take the aircraft to an extreme angle of attack without losing control. Despite its success in the wind tunnel, the system was never used on the X-29. Unlike the X-29, the X-31 is geared towards military applications rather than strictly aerodynamic research. Drawing its engine and instrument panel from the F-18 and its landing gear from the F-16, this hybrid aircraft was created under pressure to keep pace with Soviet developments. It was believed that an aircraft was needed that would be able to reach an extremely high angle of attack without experiencing the stall symptoms of a conventional fighter. If a pilot could point the nose of the fighter up at an excess of 50 degrees and still be able to control the aircraft, he would have a remarkable advantage in the close combat dogfighting of the future. Another goal was to reduce turning radius. The maneuverable F-18 uses 3 miles of sky during a supersonic turn. All aircraft have a maximum speed at which they can turn, so a new approach was needed. The X-31 would accomplish this goal of maintaining control at a high angle of attack. At this angle, conventional aircraft would stall and go out of control because the lift producing airflow is significantly reduced. The aircraft loses its grip on the air and falls until lift can be restored. With the X-31, the computer-controlled thrust vectoring system takes over, counteracting the effects of the stall with sheer force. The delta wing and canards help give the plane agility in this mode. Now the pilot is able to point the nose in either direction while his aircraft defies gravity. The pilot can completely reverse direction in record time with a series of maneuvers never before possible. With these flights, the X-31 had clearly broken the stall barrier. Pilots from Germany and the U.S. guided the aircraft through the flight test phase, attempting to acclimatize themselves to the often disorienting forces of post-stall flight. Like all experimental planes, the X-31 was breaking new ground. And like all experimental test pilots, the X-31 pilots encountered surprises every time they flew the aircraft. No simulator or wind tunnel could predict the forces the pilot would experience as he pushed the nose upwards to new extremes. Created using new aerodynamic insights, the X-31 is a flying laboratory that has generated valuable new information. But the high risks involved in flying these aircraft sometimes seem nothing compared to the dangers of post-flight celebrations. Even with all the sophisticated simulation systems and laboratory research, the modern test pilot is still an integral part of flight research. There's still a need for the human touch.
What is the most important characteristic in a test pilot? And I think, in my mind, it's decisiveness. Well, wait a minute. Maybe it isn't decisiveness. Maybe it's thinking maybe it would be technical. I'm not really sure.
What is for sure is that the pilots that fly the revolutionary X-29 and X-31 are true explorers, discovering new frontiers in aerodynamic capability, leading the way into the future of aviation. By the 1960s, the conquest of space is the new goal of the superpowers. In a search for an aircraft which will fly into orbit and land back on Earth, the M2F1 emerges. These designs will change the shape of aviation forever, leading to the birth of today's space shuttle. The Apollo program fulfilled the challenge put forward by President Kennedy to put a man on the moon by the end of the 60s. With this grand gesture, the U.S. became the predominant force in space, winning the space race with the Soviet Union. But Apollo was a ballistic capsule system, chosen because it was the quickest and most expedient way. The capsule would re-enter the atmosphere and tumble to a splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. Many felt this a rather inelegant way to return from space when prototypes existed of a vehicle able to be piloted back to Earth for a safe and accurate landing on a conventional runway. Test pilot Jerry Gentry.
The objective was to have a vehicle that would come back and could not only land on land, but also could be reusable, because the capsules, Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, were, once they hit the salt water and got corroded, I mean, that was the end of them. And also, there were a great many of us, especially those of us in the Air Force, to question the need or the desire to have a Navy flotilla out there to try and pick you up. Just also, to a pilot, the idea of coming down a parachute. Most of us think the parachutes are for emergency procedures, emergency landings only, rather than a routine way of coming back to land on terra firma.
The Apollo program taught us much, but the capsule was not the answer for the future. During hypersonic acceleration and re-entry, aircraft with sharp protruding wings and fins would be burnt up. However, blunt bodies like conical capsules are very efficient, deflecting shock waves and heat away. During the early 50s, researchers started testing half-cone shapes, called lifting bodies. With rounded bottoms and flat tops acting like a wing, the body of the aircraft produced its own lift. In 1962, this V8-powered Pontiac was a familiar sight at Edwards Air Force Base. In tow was one of the strangest-looking aircraft ever seen. This flying bathtub was the M2F1. Without official sanction, and with little money, a group of NASA scientists independently built the plywood glider to see if a lifting body could be successfully flown. After getting a feel for the aircraft behind the Pontiac, the next step was to tow the aircraft to altitude by C-47 and test handling qualities and landings. NASA test pilot and veteran of the X-15 program, Milt Thompson, made the first glide flight in a lifting body on August 16, 1963. Although it exhibited a disturbing tendency to roll if it hit any turbulence, it proved a fairly flyable aircraft. Thompson's X-15 experience contributed much, as the M2F1 displayed quite similar approach characteristics. The M2F1 flew over 100 times, providing valuable data and demonstrating that steep power-off landings could be safe and very accurate. By 1966, with the success of the M2F1, NASA and the Air Force sanctioned a rocket-powered lifting body. The Northrop M2F2 was to be launched mid-air from a B-52. Jerry Gentry was to fly the M2F2 for the Air Force.
As you get a marvelous view, maybe you can understand what a bomb might feel like being carried aloft if a bomb had any feelings. But that's exactly what you are. The only thing that is different in our case was that we could get off anytime we wanted. And it was a long ride. It was about 45 minutes to 45,000 feet, so you had a lot of time to think about it and mentally prepare yourself for the flight.
As they reached 45,000 feet at 450 miles per hour, the little aircraft dropped away. Pilots found the experience of flight without wings only a little disturbing at first.
Once you get past the fact that it doesn't have any wings, you know it's going to lift. Anything will lift. Barn doors will lift if you can figure out how to control them, and that's essentially with the control surfaces and fins on the lifting body, we felt we could control it. The question was how stable was it going to be and how easy was it going to be to fly.
Control and stability was a problem on the very first flight in July 1966, when Milt Thompson encountered the same instability he'd experienced in the M2F1, but the flight ended in a successful landing. However, during flight number 16, NASA pilot Bruce Peterson wasn't so lucky. The same problem cropped up again, and Peterson struggled to control the rolling aircraft. He succeeded, but after dodging a chase helicopter, he had no time to fully extend the landing gear. The result? A catastrophe. After hitting the runway at 217 miles per hour, his aircraft rolled 6 times, ripping itself apart. Although badly injured, Bruce Peterson survived to fly again, as did the M2. Using new data, it was rebuilt. Test pilot Bill Dana took the first flight in the M2F3.
I had the reward of flying the next flight after we rebuilt it with a modified aileron system that no longer had this lateral instability, and that probably was my most challenging flight because it followed immediately a stark disaster.
The M2F3 was modified with a third centrally mounted vertical fin to improve stability. In its 27 flights, it reached an altitude of over 71,500 feet and flew over 1,060 miles per hour. Retired in 1972, it is now displayed at the National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. The vast testing facilities of NASA and other agencies have proved essential for successful research flight. This model of the HL-10, a lifting body stablemate of the M2F2, is being evaluated for different landing methods. Effort was even expended on tests for a water landing. Wind tunnel analysis was essential for any new aircraft, and exotic shapes like the HL-10 got a great deal of attention before flight test. Full-scale test models were expensive, but proved invaluable in discovering problems not noticed in the smaller scale models. Rolled out in 1966, its first glide flight exposed a desperate need for modifications. 1.5 years later, it was back in the air. The Northrop HL-10 was basically the M2F2 shape, but upside down. Instead of a curved bottom and flat top, it had a flat bottom. In October 1968, the HL-10 became the first lifting body to be flown under power. It would go on to make the first lifting body supersonic flight, eventually reaching 1,228 miles per hour and an altitude of over 90,000 feet. The unlikely-looking HL-10 would remain the fastest and highest flying of all the lifting bodies. The Northrop HL-10 and the M2 were true pioneers of the lifting body concept. NASA's Bill Dana flew them both.
Probably got less attention because they weren't X-airplanes, but I considered them equally contributory to the lifting body technology and to the development of the steep power-off approach and landing techniques that were developed for the space shuttle.
The road to an X-series spaceplane has always been rocky. The Boeing X-20 Dinosaur was an early design for a reusable shuttle-type space vehicle that would enter orbit by multi-stage booster and glide back to Earth for a conventional horizontal landing. However, it became a victim of budget overruns and the swing toward the easier capsule method. But through its ancillary programs, much was learned. ASSET was an important X-20 support project designed to provide data on re-entry and test a number of shapes and heat-resistant materials. The small-scale models were launched on top of a Thor ballistic missile. The missile would almost push the little vehicle into orbit. After separation, it would glide down into the Pacific and be recovered. Recovery was important because although ASSET transmitted data, it also carried on board recording instruments. The recovered vehicles also vividly showed the extremes of heat encountered during re-entry and acceleration. Materials able to withstand such thermal punishment proved difficult to find.
But that was in the 60s, and there was a lot of metals that have been developed since then that people in those days were calling unobtainium because there just weren't any.
Another X-20 support program was the X-23, or Prime. Using a similar system to ASSET, Prime was designed to extend studies into wingless flight control during re-entry and test new kinds of shielding. Researchers developed a material that during extreme temperatures would ablate or char and peel off, taking the heat with it. The X-23 also tested a new lifting body shape that was set to make its debut as a manned aircraft. The Martin Marietta X-24A would begin where the X-23 left off, exploring the lower regions of the return from space. Rolled out in July 1967, it became a true ugly duckling story. For later in its life, it would go through a startling transformation. The X-24's appearance seemed almost comical, but its shape had purpose.
People called it the flying football, and it did look a little bit like a football, sort of partially deflated. But the object was to have a curved, smooth bottom on these things because you would be re-entering bottom first, and therefore that's where you would have your ablative material that would have to withstand the heat of re-entry.
Jerry Gentry was the first to fly the X-24A. It called for skill and discipline.
Each mission, or flight test as we called it, was thoroughly rehearsed and practiced. In other words, I liken it to very much like a dance routine that somebody would do on a stage, because from the moment you launch, you're going through a set of procedures.
A series of unpowered glide flights began on April 17, 1969, with Gentry at the controls. This was common procedure with these air-launched X-planes, giving the pilot a chance to become familiar with the aircraft's basic handling qualities. Powered flights were initiated a year later in March. Again, Gentry was the pilot. Like its predecessors, the X-24A was powered by an XLR-11 rocket engine, which had a rather distinguished background.
The rocket engine was the same as the one that was used in the X-1 that when Chuck Yeager broke the speed of sound. It was slightly uprated and thrust, but other than that, it was identical.
After launch at 45,000 feet, the X-24A would fly under rocket power for around 2.5 minutes, then nose over for a steep 5-minute gliding descent. The pilot could almost just point at the spot he wanted to touch down on, as the angle of approach was so steep. After the fast-acting landing gear literally snapped into position, it would be traveling around 200 miles an hour. In an emergency, to give extra airspeed or to cushion the landing, small hydrogen peroxide rockets could be used. In over 3 years of flight testing, no major problems were encountered by the X-24A during these steep power-off landings. The method seemed to be a safe and economic way of bringing a space shuttle back to Earth without costly and heavy retractable landing engines that were being considered. Researchers saw other uses. Large commercial passenger aircraft use great amounts of fuel and create air and noise pollution using conventional landing patterns. The lifting body team offered a solution. To demonstrate, a big B-52 was readied for landing by bringing engines to idle and raising the large air brakes on top of the wings, dropping the flaps, and making an approach with landing gear fully extended. The effect was to cause greater drag, so the bomber would come in steep and quietly, effectively making a landing at a very low power setting and therefore becoming economical. Demonstrations were carried out for commercial aviation authorities using NASA's Convair 990 airliner with some modifications to its flaps. Although these spin-offs from the lifting body research program showed this was a viable, safe, and economic way to land commercial aircraft, the team came across no one willing to give it a try. The X-24A was to fly 28 times, reach a maximum altitude of over 71,400 feet, and chalk up a speed of just over 1,000 miles per hour. It was flown for the final time by NASA's John Mankey on June 4, 1971. But the story of this peculiar-looking aircraft doesn't end here, because the X-24A would be reborn. NASA and the Air Force were eager to test another shape that they felt could provide greater performance. Budgets were tight. To build a brand new aircraft would cost at least $5 million. For $1 million, they could reconfigure the X-24A. The already proven systems were retained, but a brand new body was fitted over the original airframe. The transformation took 10 months. The result was the sleek new X-24B. The new double delta flat iron shape was a stark contrast to the A model, and pilots that flew it noticed that its controllability and maneuverability was vastly improved. In 36 flights over 2 years, the X-24B provided a huge amount of valuable data. This sleek, futuristic design is seen as the final step in the evolutionary trail to the space shuttle. The shuttle's ability to return to Earth in a long, steep glide and touch down safely on a conventional runway is beholden to a family of the strangest shapes ever to become airborne. The X-24A's strange shape can still be seen at the Air Force Museum in Ohio, impersonated by its jet-powered brother, the never-flown SV-5J. It's a touch of irony, but a fitting tribute to the lifting body that had a facelift. The lifting bodies belie their odd appearance, for they proved vital for the continuation of aerospace advancements.
We were able to prove in the lifting body program that you could land these vehicles very, very accurately. Our touchdown dispersion seldom measured more than plus or minus 500 feet from an intended spot, and we always named our landing spot before we landed.
The X-24A and the other lifting bodies were a breed apart. Radical shapes, showing the way for future space flights, silently gliding home and landing safely.
The Lockheed YF-12 represented a pinnacle of American aerospace engineering, boasting Mach 3+ capability and high-altitude interception potential. Developed and produced by Lockheed Corporation, this interceptor emerged during the late 1950s and early 1960s as a candidate to replace the F-106 Delta Dart interceptor within the United States Air Force. President Lyndon B. Johnson publicly disclosed the existence of the YF-12 on February 24, 1964, primarily to provide a cover story for the CIA-operated A-12 fleet, which closely resembled the newly revealed prototype. Despite undergoing rigorous flight evaluations by the USAF during the 1960s, operational deployment of the YF-12 was thwarted by funding constraints, compounded by the difficulties of the Vietnam War and other military imperatives. Nevertheless, it secured and maintained speed and altitude records exceeding 2,000 miles per hour, 3,200 kilometers an hour, and soaring beyond 80,000 feet, 24,000 meters, subsequently eclipsed by its successor, the SR-71 Blackbird. Remarkably, the YF-12 holds the distinction of being the world's largest, heaviest, and fastest crewed interceptor. After its retirement from USAF service, the YF-12 found new life as a research platform for NASA, contributing to advancements in supersonic aircraft control systems. Originating from the Long Range Interceptor Experimental LRIX initiative, which initially considered the North American XF-108 Rapier, the YF-12's genesis, intertwined with Lockheed's A-12 reconnaissance program, was overseen by the CIA under the Oxcart program. Under the visionary leadership of Kelly Johnson at Lockheed Skunk Works, the YF-12 emerged as a derivative of the A-12, designated as the AF-12, and subsequently configured as the YF-12A interceptor. The transformation of the A-12 reconnaissance aircraft into the YF-12A interceptor involved several key modifications, chiefly centered around accommodating the formidable Hughes AN/ASG-18 fire control radar originally intended for the XF-108 interceptor. The A-12's nose underwent alterations, including the reduction of the chines to integrate the large radar, along with embedding 2 infrared search and track sensors into the chine leading edge. Additionally, a second cockpit was installed to house a crew member responsible for operating the fire control radar for the air-to-air missile system. These modifications significantly altered the aircraft's aerodynamics, necessitating the addition of ventral fins under the fuselage and engine nacelles to maintain stability. Moreover, 3 of the A-12's 4 bays were repurposed to accommodate Hughes AIM-47 Falcon GAR-9 missiles, while 1 bay was dedicated to fire control equipment. The YF-12A's maiden flight took place on August 7, 1963, although its existence was not publicly acknowledged until President Lyndon B. Johnson's announcement on February 24, 1964. This revelation served to divert attention from the still classified A-12 program. The YF-12A was showcased to the public for the first time on September 30, 1964 at Edwards Air Force Base. Despite the promising performance of the YF-12A and the subsequent order of 93 F-12B aircraft for the Air Defense Command, the program faced setbacks due to funding constraints driven by the escalating costs of the Vietnam War. Secretary of Defense Robert McNamara withheld funding for 3 consecutive years, leading to the cancellation of the F-12B program in January 1968. During flight tests, the YF-12A set impressive speed and altitude records, reaching 2,070.101 miles per hour, 3,331.505 kilometers an hour, and 80,257.86 feet, 24,462.6 meters, respectively, on May 1, 1965. The unique weapon system of the YF-12A also demonstrated promise, with 6 successful firings of the AIM-47 missiles completed. Although 1 missile failed due to gyro malfunction, the remaining missiles showcased their effectiveness, including a remarkable hit on a JQB-47E target drone at Mach 3.2 and an altitude of 74,000 feet, 23,000 meters, resulting in a direct hit and significant damage. The YF-12 program faced significant challenges despite its successes, particularly in securing further funding and addressing control issues that affected both engine performance and physical aircraft control. Secretary of Defense McNamara redirected funding from the YF-12 program to the F-106X program, which faced difficulties and was less successful. Despite this setback, developments from the YF-12 program found applications in subsequent projects. The AIM-47 Falcon missile, proven successful during YF-12 testing, underwent enhancements to become the AIM-54 Phoenix missile used on the F-14 Tomcat. Additionally, upgrades to the AN/ASG-18 radar resulted in the AN/AWG-9 and APG-71 systems, which provided improved tracking capabilities for multiple targets. Jim Irwin, one of the Air Force test pilots involved in the YF-12 program, transitioned to become a NASA astronaut and famously walked on the moon. Although the production of the F-12B was cancelled, the YF-12 aircraft continued to serve both the USAF and NASA as research aircraft for many years. NASA conducted tests to address various engineering challenges, including engine inlet performance, boundary layer noise, heat transfer under high Mach conditions, and altitude hold at supersonic speeds. These tests were crucial for advancing the understanding of supersonic flight. The YF-12 and the SR-71 initially faced control issues, but wind tunnel testing and research flights led to the development of computer systems that significantly improved performance and stability. The implementation of systems like the Central Airborne Performance Analyzer and the Cooperative Airframe Propulsion Control System played crucial roles in enhancing the control of supersonic aircraft during flight, addressing issues such as engine unstarts and improving overall stability and performance. The challenges of controlling aircraft at such high speeds were significant, with even minor changes in direction leading to substantial deviations in position, often accompanied by severe temperature and pressure changes. The implementation of the Cooperative Airframe Propulsion Control System played a crucial role in mitigating these deviations, reducing them by a factor of 10. These improvements not only enhanced the stability and control of the aircraft, but also increased the range of the SR-71 by 7%, demonstrating the effectiveness of the system in optimizing performance. Unfortunately, the YF-12A program experienced losses during its operational lifespan. One of the aircraft, designated AF serial number 606934, was damaged beyond repair in a landing mishap at Edwards Air Force Base on the 14th of August 1966. Another YF-12A, AF serial number 606936, was lost on the 24th of June 1971 due to an in-flight fire caused by a failed fuel line. Fortunately, both pilots ejected safely, averting a potential disaster. The sole surviving YF-12A, designated AF serial number 606935, was recalled from storage in 1969 for a joint investigation by the USAF and NASA into supersonic cruise technology. It was subsequently transferred to the National Museum of the United States Air Force at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base near Dayton, Ohio, where it remains as a testament to the pioneering era of high-speed, high-altitude flight research. The North American XB-70 Valkyrie indeed represented a bold and ambitious leap forward in strategic bomber design during the Cold War era. With its ability to fly at supersonic speeds and operate at high altitudes, the Valkyrie embodied the pursuit of technological superiority and strategic deterrence. Its impressive performance capabilities, including a top speed exceeding Mach 3 and a cruising altitude of 70,000 feet, set it apart from conventional bombers of its time. Designed to carry a substantial payload of nuclear weapons over long distances at high speeds, the XB-70 promised unparalleled strategic striking power. However, the XB-70 also faced significant challenges and limitations. Its immense size and weight, coupled with the complexities of its advanced design, posed engineering and operational hurdles. Additionally, evolving military doctrines and advancements in missile technology rendered the high-altitude, high-speed bomber concept less relevant over time. Despite its status as a technological marvel and a symbol of aerospace innovation, the XB-70 ultimately fell victim to changing strategic priorities and the shifting landscape of aerial warfare. While its legacy lives on as a testament to the ambitious spirit of Cold War-era aviation, the Valkyrie's operational career was short-lived and only a handful of prototypes were ever built. The engineering innovations incorporated into the XB-70 Valkyrie were indeed groundbreaking and aimed at maximizing its performance capabilities. The 6 powerful General Electric YJ-93 turbojet engines, each generating 28,800 pounds of thrust, provided the necessary propulsion for achieving and sustaining supersonic speeds. The use of afterburners, particularly effective at high speeds, enabled efficient supersonic cruise, albeit at the expense of fuel consumption. The utilization of fuel for cooling, a technique also employed in the SR-71 Blackbird, exemplifies the innovative approaches adopted to address the extreme heat generated during high-speed flight. By circulating fuel through the aircraft's structure, heat absorption and dissipation were managed, contributing to the aircraft's ability to withstand the rigors of supersonic travel. The delta wings, with their inherent aerodynamic advantages at supersonic velocities, were further optimized with adjustable wingtips to enhance the aircraft's performance characteristics. This, combined with a sophisticated wedge-shaped air intake and other design features, allow the XB-70 to exploit its own shockwave for reduced drag and increased lift, facilitating efficient flight at high speeds and altitudes. Moreover, the use of advanced materials like titanium and brazed stainless steel honeycombs contributed to the aircraft's structural integrity and overall weight reduction, essential for achieving optimal performance in extreme flight conditions. These cutting-edge materials represented a significant leap forward in aerospace technology, enabling the XB-70 to push the boundaries of speed and altitude like never before. The XB-70 Valkyrie's capabilities indeed surpassed those of contemporary aircraft, positioning it as an unparalleled asset in the realm of strategic aviation. However, the emergence of advanced surface-to-air missile systems, particularly the Soviet S-75 Dvina, posed a formidable threat that undermined the XB-70's strategic relevance. The S-75V's ability to match the XB-70's speed and altitude performance rendered traditional manned bombers increasingly vulnerable, prompting a shift in military strategy towards intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, as a more effective deterrent. The evolving landscape of military technology and strategic priorities led to the cancellation of the XB-70 program as a defense project in 1961. Nevertheless, the XB-70 found a new role within NASA's research initiatives, leveraging its exceptional speed and altitude capabilities to support the development of a potential American supersonic transport. NASA's utilization of the XB-70 for testing and experimentation underscored its enduring significance as a platform for advancing aerospace innovation beyond its original military applications. Furthermore, NASA's involvement in refining the XB-70 design, particularly with enhancements to stability and high-speed performance, exemplified the aircraft's adaptability and versatility in addressing diverse aviation challenges. While the XB-70's military aspirations may have been curtailed by shifting strategic imperatives, its legacy endured through its contributions to pioneering research endeavors aimed at shaping the future of supersonic flight. The tragic mid-air collision involving the second XB-70 Valkyrie during a photo shoot in 1966 marked a somber chapter in the aircraft's history. The loss of the Valkyrie's vertical stabilizers and the subsequent unrecoverable roll underscored the inherent risks associated with high-speed flight testing and aerial maneuvers. As the aviation landscape evolved, with advancements such as the YF-12 and the SR-71 surpassing the capabilities of the XB-70, the Valkyrie's role became increasingly marginalized. The loss of the more capable second XB-70 further diminished its relevance in comparison to the more advanced research capabilities offered by other aircraft. The retirement of the sole remaining XB-70 on February 4, 1969, symbolized the end of an era for the groundbreaking aircraft. Despite its limited flight hours, the XB-70 left an indelible mark on aviation history, serving as a testament to the ingenuity and ambition of aerospace engineers and the pursuit of pushing the boundaries of flight. The XB-70 Valkyrie's presence at the National Museum of the US Air Force indeed commands attention and stands as a testament to its monumental significance in aviation history. Its imposing size and distinctive angular design make it a focal point in the museum's Research and Development Gallery, overshadowing even other remarkable prototype aircraft. With its futuristic appearance characterized by sharp edges and sleek lines, the Valkyrie represents a vision of aviation that was ahead of its time. Its design language, dominated by right angles and razor edges, remains unparalleled, evoking a sense of innovation and progress. Despite its relatively short operational lifespan and absence of combat engagements, the Valkyrie's impact on aircraft design and technology cannot be overstated. It served as a precursor to future developments in aviation, influencing the designs of subsequent aircraft, particularly in the realm of supersonic transport. Indeed, the legacy of the XB-70 extends beyond its own existence, as multiple companies drew inspiration from its design principles when developing their own supersonic transport concepts. This legacy solidifies the XB-70 Valkyrie's place in aviation history as a pioneering aircraft that provided glimpses of the future of flight. The XB-70 Valkyrie's influence extends beyond its direct contemporaries, shaping the trajectory of aviation development in both the United States and the Soviet Union. The B-1 Lancer, with its swept-wing design and supersonic capabilities, bears echoes of the Valkyrie's shape, demonstrating how the XB-70's legacy lived on in subsequent aircraft designs. In response to the perceived threat posed by the XB-70, the Soviets developed the Mig-25, one of the fastest interceptors ever built. While the Mig-25 had its flaws, its successor, the Mig-31, remains in service to this day, underscoring the enduring impact of the XB-70 on global military aviation. The XB-70 Valkyrie stands as a quintessential symbol of early Cold War aviation, representing a bold and ambitious endeavor to push the boundaries of performance and technology. Despite its remarkable speed and advanced design, the XB-70 ultimately struggled to remain relevant in an evolving strategic landscape. In contrast, More versatile aircraft designs from the same era, such as the B-52 Stratofortress, have endured and adapted to changing military needs, highlighting the challenges faced by revolutionary but specialized platforms like the XB-70. Nevertheless, the XB-70 Valkyrie remains a remarkable artifact of the jet age, offering a tantalizing glimpse into the futuristic vision of aviation promised in the 1950s. Its legacy continues to inspire awe and admiration for its groundbreaking design and ambitious aspirations. NASA achieved a significant milestone in aviation by successfully conducting the first and second flights of a scramjet-powered aircraft at hypersonic speeds, exceeding Mach 5 or 5 times the speed of sound.
Unlike conventional rockets that must carry its own oxygen to operate, scramjets are air breathers that obtain oxygen from the air in which it's flying, and this characteristic allows for much more airplane-like operations with increased safety, affordability, and flexibility.
The NASA Hyper-X program, spanning 8 years with an investment of around $230 million, represented a bold initiative in research, pushing the boundaries of what had been previously attempted. The successful March 2004 flight marked the first instance of an air-breathing engine-powered vehicle achieving hypersonic velocities. The intricate process of rocket propulsion, followed by scramjet operation, presented a series of technical challenges, all of which needed to be meticulously addressed for mission success. Despite thorough analyses and design optimizations aimed at mitigating risks, some residual risk remained inherent to the program. The Hyper-X Research Initiative began in 1996 with conceptual development and experimentation in wind tunnel environments. 3 unpiloted X-43A research aircraft were built. Each of the lifting body vehicles, measuring 12 feet in length and 5 feet in width, was designed for a single flight without recovery. While visually identical, these vehicles were engineered with subtle variations to simulate different engine configurations, typically corresponding to various Mach numbers. The initial 2 vehicles were optimized for flight at Mach 7, while the third was tailored for Mach 10 velocities. Operating at such velocities, the four-body shape of the vehicle functioned akin to pistons in an engine, compressing air as fuel was injected for combustion. The X-43A utilized gaseous hydrogen as its fuel source.
The ultimate goal of hypersonics really is twofold. One is to reduce the cost for access to space. Routinely getting to space with this type of technology or using this technology, an operational space access vehicle is a goal. The second goal, and probably one that's farther out, granted, but maybe 100 years out, but hypersonic commercial travel, I think, can be a reality someday and anywhere in the globe in just a few hours.
Following an unsuccessful launch attempt in June 2001 due to booster rocket malfunction, subsequent flights in March and November 2004 achieved remarkable success, breaking speed records. In March 2004, the X-43A attained a velocity of Mach 6.8, shattering the previous record for air-breathing vehicles. During its final flight at nearly Mach 10, the X-43A reached a speed of 6,755 miles an hour at an altitude of 110,000 feet, establishing a new world speed record for air-breathing vehicles. The Mach 10 vehicle was equipped with enhanced thermal protection, including the integration of carbon-carbon composite material on the leading edges of its vertical fins to withstand higher temperatures. Both flights commenced with the B-52B aircraft transporting the stack to a predetermined location over the Pacific Ocean, 50 miles west of the Southern California coast. The release altitude from the B-52B was consistent at 40,000 feet for both successful flights, from which point the booster propelled each research vehicle to its designated test altitude and velocity. Aside from variations in altitude, speed, and distance covered, the flight profile of the Mach 10 mission mirrored that of the Mach 7 flight. Following separation from the booster, the Mach 10 research vehicle autonomously flew according to pre-programmed commands. Separation from the booster was facilitated by 2 small pistons. Shortly thereafter, the scramjet engine operated for approximately 10 seconds, yielding substantial and unique flight data for an integrated scramjet system. Throughout both flights, the engine's thrust closely matched its design specifications, enabling acceleration during the Mach 7 flight and sustained cruising at constant velocity during the Mach 10 flight. Upon completion of the scramjet engine test, each vehicle transitioned into a high-speed maneuvering glide, gathering nearly 10 minutes of hypersonic aerodynamic data en route to a designated mission completion point. For the Mach 7 flight, this point was located approximately 450 miles west, while for the Mach 10 flight, it extended to 850 miles west, within the Naval Air Warfare Center Weapons Division sea range off the southern coast of California. As planned, both vehicles descended into the ocean upon completion of their missions without any recovery efforts undertaken. The achievements of reaching Mach 6.8 and Mach 9.6 have been officially recognized by Guinness World Records, appearing on their website in the 2006 edition of their record book. The inaugural flight attempt of the X-43A took place in June 2001. However, it was unsuccessful due to booster failure, leading to its premature termination. Consequently, the research vehicle didn't undergo testing as it did not reach the required test conditions. Although no single contributing factor was found, the root cause of the problem was identified as the booster's flight control system. The booster's failure stemmed from inaccuracies in design models, which had overestimated the flight control system's capability to function within anticipated flight conditions. The Hyper-X program has played a pivotal role in pushing the boundaries of air-breathing flight, notably achieving the milestone of flying a scramjet-powered aircraft at hypersonic speeds for the first time. Various measures were implemented in response to the identified issues. These included conducting wind tunnel tests to gather data aimed at reducing atmospheric loads on the booster's control surfaces, enhancing booster fin actuators to better withstand aerodynamic forces, and adjusting propellant levels in the Pegasus booster to facilitate launches at the standard altitude of 40,000 feet, as opposed to the lower altitude of 23,000 feet utilized during the initial flight. A ramjet engine functions by combusting fuel in a stream of air compressed by the aircraft's forward speed, in contrast to conventional jet engines, where the compressor section compresses the air. Ramjets typically operate within the Mach 3 to Mach 6 range. Scramjets represent an advancement of ramjet technology, maintaining supersonic airflow through the engine. Envisaged applications for scramjet-powered vehicles extend to speeds exceeding Mach 15. While ground tests of scramjet combustors have demonstrated this potential, flight tests have yet to surpass the achievement of the Mach 9.6 flight attained by the X-43A. The Hyper-X program, managed by the Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate in Washington, was conducted jointly by the Langley Research Center in Hampton, Virginia, and the Dryden, now Armstrong, Flight Research Center in Edwards, California. Langley served as the lead center, spearheading the development of hypersonic technology. Dryden's responsibilities encompassed flight research, hardware integration, and testing. NASA's Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate is dedicated to advancing tools and technologies that can revolutionize air transportation operations, aircraft design, and manufacturing processes, and enhance the safety of the nation's air transportation system. The experimental X-51A WaveRider serves as an unmanned autonomous hypersonic flight test demonstrator powered by a supersonic combustion ramjet scramjet engine commissioned by the U.S. Air Force. Launched from an airborne B-52 Stratofortress bomber, the X-51A comprises a stack approximately 25 feet in length, incorporating a modified solid rocket booster sourced from an Army tactical missile, an interstage connection, and the X-51A cruiser itself. The cruiser, nearly devoid of wings, derives its moniker WaveRider from its unique design feature of riding its own shockwave. This distinctive aircraft boasts small, controllable fins and houses the core component, a Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne SJY-61 scramjet engine engineered to burn JP-7 jet fuel. Boeing's Phantom Works spearheaded the overall air vehicle design, assembly and testing, employing standard aerospace materials such as aluminum, steel, Inconel and titanium, supplemented by carbon-carbon composites for leading edges of fins and cowls. To withstand the intense thermal conditions, the X-51A integrates a silica-based thermal protection system developed by Boeing alongside reusable insulation tiles akin to those utilized on NASA Space Shuttle orbiters. The Air Force commissioned the construction of 4 X-51As, emphasizing the program's role as a technology demonstrator rather than as a prototype for a specific weapons system. Its primary objective is to advance hypersonic weaponry, intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities, and enhance future access to space. The ability of scramjets to utilize atmospheric oxygen negates the need for large onboard oxidizer tanks, typical of conventional rockets, promising more efficient payload launches into orbit. Alongside scalable scramjet propulsion, the X-51A will showcase advancements in thermal protection systems materials, airframe and engine integration, and high-speed stability and control. Representing a significant reinvestment in hypersonic flight, the X-51A program stands as a pivotal milestone for the Air Force, echoing the pioneering spirit of the rocket-powered X-15 program that preceded it by half a century. Air Force officials foresee the X-51A program as a pivotal platform for acquiring the essential knowledge needed to propel future advancements in space access and hypersonic weaponry. The program's potential for hypersonic speeds, such as covering 600 nautical miles in just 10 minutes, promises rapid and precise engagement of distant targets, a capability with transformative implications. A collaborative endeavour between the Air Force Research Laboratory, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and industry partners, the Boeing Company and Pratt & Whitney Rocketdyne, the X-51A program is managed by the Air Force Research Laboratory Propulsion Directorate at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. Hypersonic flight, commencing at Mach 5, presents distinctive technical hurdles involving extreme heat and pressure, rendering traditional turbine engines impractical. Generating thrust with a scramjet engine is likened to maintaining a flame in a hurricane, an analogy underscoring the formidable challenges faced by program officials. The Air Force intends to execute identical flight profiles for each X-51A, akin to the operational approach of the X-15. Following this same deployment method as its predecessor, the X-51A is hoisted aloft by a B-52 mothership from the Air Force Flight Test Center at Edwards Air Force Base, California. Upon reaching approximately 50,000 feet above the Pacific Ocean's Point Mugu Naval Air Warfare Center Sea range, the solid rocket booster propels the X-51A to around Mach 4.5 for 30 seconds before detaching. Subsequently, the cruiser's scramjet engine initiates, distinguished by its minimal moving parts, initially burning ethylene and transitioning over a span of roughly 10 seconds to the JP-7 jet fuel previously employed by the SR-71 Blackbird. Powered by its scramjet engine, the X-51A accelerates to approximately Mach 6 while ascending to nearly 70,000 feet. Hypersonic combustion generates intense heat, so routing the engine's own JP-7 fuel will serve to both cool the engine and heat the fuel to optimum operating temperature for combustion. The X-51A's fuel load and flight profile facilitate a 240-second engine burn, during which extensive telemetry data on its systems is transmitted to orbiting aircraft and ground stations. As planned, the vehicle exhausts its fuel supply, ultimately splashing down into the Pacific Ocean, where it meets its preordained demise. Flight test vehicles are intentionally not recovered, a decision made by the X-51A development team from the outset to streamline costs and prioritize funding toward perfecting the vehicle's fuel-cooled scramjet engine. During flight, telemetry data is relayed to engineers stationed at Naval Air Station Point Mugu and Vandenberg Air Force Base, California, via a U.S. Navy P-3 Orion aircraft. This information is then forwarded to the Ridley Mission Control Center at Edwards Air Force Base, where it undergoes analysis. Conceived in 2004, the X-51A embarked on its inaugural captive carry flight on December 9, 2009, validating the B-52's performance and handling characteristics at high altitudes with the X-51 attached. Communication and telemetry systems were also tested during this flight, albeit with the vehicle remaining attached to the B-52's wing. The X-51A etched its name in the annals of aviation history during its maiden supersonic combustion ramjet-powered hypersonic flight on May 26, 2010, off the coast of Southern California. Demonstrating flawless performance, the scramjet propelled the vehicle to approximately Mach 5, or nearly 3,400 miles per hour, for nearly 200 seconds. Although telemetry remained normal for over 140 seconds, a decrease in thrust and acceleration occurred during the subsequent 30 seconds, followed by an anomaly resulting in a loss of telemetry. Consequently, flight controllers terminated the test and commanded the destruction of the vehicle. Despite the anomaly, the May 26 flight marked the inaugural use of a practical hydrocarbon-fueled scramjet in flight. Notably, this achievement surpassed the longest previous hypersonic scramjet flight test conducted by a NASA X-43 in 2004, which, although faster, lasted only about 12 seconds and employed less logistically supportable hydrogen fuel. Subsequent to an exhaustive analysis of flight data from the X-51A's maiden hypersonic flight, slight modifications are slated to reinforce the rear seal area near the engine exhaust nozzles for the 3 remaining X-51As. Regrettably, the following 2 X-51A flights concluded prematurely. During the second X-51A flight, the vehicle was propelled by the rocket to slightly above Mach 5 before disengaging and activating the scramjet engine fueled by ethylene. However, upon attempting to transition to JP7 fuel operation, an inlet unstart occurred. Despite efforts to restart and optimize engine start conditions, the vehicle remained unsuccessful in its attempts. It maintained controlled flight orientation until ultimately descending into the ocean within the test range. In the case of the third X-51A, a successful separation from the B-52 was followed by 16 seconds under the rocket booster, after which a fault was detected with one of the cruiser's control fins. Subsequently, upon detachment from the rocket booster roughly 15 seconds later, the cruiser lost control due to the malfunctioning fin and was ultimately lost. Conversely, the final flight of the X-51A on May 1, 2013 proved to be the most successful, achieving all experiment objectives. The cruiser traversed more than 230 nautical miles in just over 6 minutes, attaining a peak speed of Mach 5.1. In totality, the X-51A program amassed over 9 minutes of invaluable data, marking a groundbreaking accomplishment and validating the feasibility of air-breathing, high-speed scramjet propulsion utilizing hydrocarbon fuel. On May 1, 1960, amidst the escalating tensions of the Cold War, Gary Powers found himself in a harrowing situation. His U-2 aircraft, employed for reconnaissance missions, was struck by Soviet surface-to-air missiles, plummeting from 70,000 feet to 30,000 feet before Powers managed to release himself and bail out from the damaged cockpit. Meanwhile, at Lockheed's Skunk Works in Burbank, California, a team of engineers had already embarked on a groundbreaking project, the development of an aircraft that would revolutionize intelligence gathering. This aircraft, envisioned to fly faster and at greater altitudes than any before it, with minimal radar cross-section, was deemed essential in the tense geopolitical climate of the time. President Eisenhower recognized the strategic importance of airborne reconnaissance, particularly in light of the U-2's contributions. In response to the urgent need for an aircraft resistant to enemy fire, Lockheed received a directive from its government client in Washington to create the seemingly impossible, a plane impervious to interception. Led by the renowned aircraft designer Kelly Johnson, the Skunk Works team was renowned for its ability to deliver groundbreaking technologies under tight deadlines. The U-2 project was a testament to their resourcefulness, creativity, and unwavering determination in the face of technological challenges. The task at hand was unprecedented. Johnson acknowledged that every aspect of the aircraft had to be innovated from scratch. Undeterred by the daunting nature of the endeavour, he committed Skunk Works to achieve the seemingly insurmountable goal of having the revolutionary aircraft operational within a mere 20 months. The envisioned aircraft was unlike anything seen before. It was designed to sustain speeds exceeding 2,000 miles per hour for extended durations, a feat unparalleled in aviation history. Conventional airframes would succumb to the extreme temperatures generated by friction with the atmosphere at such velocities, necessitating radical innovations in design and materials. The challenges posed by the extreme temperatures anticipated on the aircraft's leading edges, exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit, presented formidable hurdles in design and material selection. Titanium alloy emerged as the sole viable option for the airframe, offering the strength of stainless steel, lightweight properties, and resilience to the intense heat. However, working with titanium proved to be a complex endeavour. The brittle nature of the alloy demanded meticulous handling, leading to frustrations on the Skunk Works assembly line and necessitating specialised training for Lockheed's machinists. Conventional tools, plated with cadmium-plated steel, proved detrimental to titanium, prompting the development and fabrication of new tools crafted from titanium itself. While the leading edges of the aircraft faced scorching temperatures, the exterior environment outside the cockpit window could plummet to -60 degrees Fahrenheit. Addressing the challenge of heat dissipation across the entire airframe, Ben Rich of Skunk Works drew inspiration from a basic lesson learned in university. Black paint possesses both heat-emitting and heat-absorbing properties. Consequently, the aircraft was coated in black paint, earning it the moniker Blackbird. The inaugural iteration of the Blackbird, designated the A-12, embarked on its maiden flight on April 30th, 1962. Subsequently, the single-seat A-12 evolved into the larger SR-71, featuring an additional seat for a reconnaissance systems officer and increased fuel capacity. The SR-71 conducted its maiden flight on December 22nd, 1964. Efforts to diminish the Blackbird's radar signature aimed to further minimize the likelihood of detection and interception. Despite promising initial test outcomes, concerns over Soviet radar advancements prompted the US government to demand an even smaller radar profile, underscoring the ongoing quest for technological superiority in the realm of aerial reconnaissance. Redesigning surfaces to minimize radar reflection, relocating engines to a more inconspicuous mid-wing position, and incorporating radar-absorbing elements into the paint were among the meticulous adjustments made to the Blackbird's design. Subsequently, a full-scale model of the aircraft underwent radar testing at a clandestine location in the Nevada desert, meticulously scheduled to evade detection by Soviet satellites. The outcomes were striking. The Blackbird model, spanning over 100 feet, appeared on Soviet radar as larger than a bird, yet smaller than a man, effectively reducing its radar cross-section by an impressive 90%. The urgency to deploy the Blackbird heightened on October 27, 1962, amidst the Cuban Missile Crisis, following the tragic death of Air Force Major Rudolph Anderson during a U-2 reconnaissance mission over Cuba, struck by a Soviet surface-to-air missile. Skunk Works redoubled its efforts, confronting and surmounting the myriad challenges encountered during flight testing as it pushed the boundaries of aeronautical achievement. Breaking records with nearly every flight, the Blackbird reached a sustained speed surpassing Mach 3 on July 20, 1963, soaring to an astonishing altitude of 78,000 feet. As the aircraft traversed the skies at 3,000 feet per second, conventional navigation norms became obsolete, replaced by landmarks such as mountain ranges, coastlines, and expansive bodies of water. Piloting the Blackbird demanded unwavering focus and skill, with pilots facing the formidable task of navigating at incredible speeds and altitudes. Despite the formidable challenges, the exhilarating responsibilities of flying the Blackbird left pilots awestruck and exhilarated. Air Force Colonel Jim Watkins reflected on the experience, describing it as almost transcendent, with memories of soaring at 85,000 feet and Mach 3 evoking profound emotions even years later. At such unparalleled speeds and altitudes, even the most advanced air defense systems stood little chance of intercepting the Blackbird. When enemy aircraft weapons were launched, a warning light illuminated on the control panel, signaling imminent danger. However, for the pilot, this often marked the extent of the threat, as surface-to-air missiles consistently veered off course, detonating miles away from their intended target. The Blackbird's legacy is adorned with numerous records. It holds the distinction of being the world's fastest and highest-flying manned aircraft. During its retirement journey from Los Angeles to Washington in 1990, en route to its final resting place in the Smithsonian Air and Space Collection, the aircraft traversed the entire continental United States in a mere 67 minutes. Above all, the Blackbird fulfilled its strategic imperatives, providing invaluable mission-critical reconnaissance for over 2 decades. The extent of its intelligence-gathering contributions during the Cold War remains largely known only to a select few. Nevertheless, its reputation as a transformative force will endure for generations to come, symbolizing innovation, resilience, and technological prowess in the annals of aviation history. The Bell X-2 was indeed a pioneering aircraft in the realm of high-speed and high-altitude research. Developed jointly by Bell Aircraft Corporation, the U.S. Air Force, and the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics (NACA), the X-2 aimed to explore the challenges of supersonic flight and expand the boundaries of speed and altitude reached by previous research aircraft like the X-1 series. Testing of rocket-launched X-2 models began in 1946 at Wallops Island, Virginia, under the auspices of the NACA's Pilotless Aircraft Research Division, PARD. These tests focused on gathering stability and control data crucial for the X-2's development. Collaborative efforts between NACA and Bell engineers also led to the design of a pilot escape system for the X-2, a critical safety feature given the extreme conditions it would face. NACA's Langley Memorial Aeronautical Laboratory in Hampton, Virginia, played a significant role in evaluating various aspects of the X-2's design, utilizing facilities such as the spin tunnel and supersonic wind tunnels. Additionally, NACA was responsible for equipping the X-2 with scientific instrumentation vital for collecting data during flight tests. Constructed at Bell's plant in Wheatfield, New York, the X-2 airframes were built using sturdy materials like stainless steel and K-mono, ensuring their resilience under the stresses of high-speed flight. Powered by a 2-chamber Curtiss-Wright XLR-25 throttleable liquid-fuel rocket engine, the X-2 boasted a variable thrust rating capable of propelling it to incredible speeds. Safety was a paramount concern in the X-2's design, exemplified by the inclusion of an escape capsule for the pilot. In the event of an emergency, the nose assembly will be jettisoned, deploying a stabilizing parachute to bring the capsule to a safe altitude. The pilot could then manually open the canopy and bail out, ensuring their survival in challenging circumstances. The operational procedures for launching and piloting the X-2 were carefully orchestrated to ensure safety and gather valuable data during flight tests. A modified Boeing B-50A bomber served as the carrier aircraft, lifting the X-2 to launch altitudes of approximately 30,000 feet. Once in position, the pilot would enter the X-2 and prepare for launch. During a planned powered flight, the pilot would release the X-2 from the bomber and ignite the rocket engines to propel the aircraft to high speeds and altitudes. Following engine burnout, the pilot would guide the X-2 in an unpowered descent, aiming for a landing on the surface of Rogers Dry Lake at Edwards Air Force Base, California. The first unpowered flight of X-2, serial number 46674, occurred on August 5, 1954, with Lieutenant Colonel Frank Pete Everest at the controls. Meanwhile, due to the decision to install the first available engine in Airframe 46674, Airframe 46675 was designated for glide tests. It arrived at Edwards on April 22, 1952, and after 2 captive flights, Bell test pilot Gene L. Skip Ziegler conducted the first glide flight on June 27th. However, a rough landing caused some damage, delaying the second glide flight until October 8th. 2 days later, Air Force test pilot Major Frank K. Pete Everest successfully completed the third glide flight of the X-2. The return of the X-2 to Bell's plant in New York marked a significant phase in its development, particularly with the installation of the engine in the second airframe, 46675. Captive flights with the newly installed engine were conducted over Lake Ontario, aiming to test various systems and components. Tragically, during one of these flights to check the liquid oxygen system, an explosion occurred, resulting in the loss of the X-2 and severe damage to the accompanying B-50 bomber. The accident claimed the lives of Skip Ziegler, the X-2 test pilot, and B-50 crew member Frank Wolkow. Despite the setback, the X-2 program persisted. The following day after the accident, preparations began for the X-2's journey to Edwards Air Force Base beneath the modified B-50D. Once at Edwards, technicians at the NACA high-speed flight station commenced the installation of instrumentation to collect handling qualities data. Additionally, on the recommendation of the NACA, the Air Force acquired a Goodyear Electronic Digital Analyzer (GEDA) analog computer. NACA project engineer Richard E. Day programmed the GEDA to serve as a rudimentary flight simulator for the X-2, aiding in further evaluations and testing. Despite the setbacks and challenges, the X-2 program continued to push the boundaries of supersonic flight research. The first attempt at a powered flight occurred on October 25, 1955, but a nitrogen leak led to a change in the flight plan, with Everest completing the mission as a glide flight. Finally, on November 18, 1955, Everest successfully completed the first powered X-2 flight, igniting only the 5,000-pound thrust rocket chamber and achieving a maximum speed of Mach 0.95. Despite several aborted attempts, Everest completed a second powered flight on March 24, 1956, this time igniting the 10,000-pound thrust rocket chamber. The first supersonic X-2 flight occurred on April 25, 1956, with both rocket chambers ignited. The aircraft reached a speed of Mach 1.4 and climbed to a maximum altitude of 50,000 feet, marking a significant milestone in the X-2 program's quest to explore the realm of supersonic flight. The X-2 program continued to push the boundaries of high-speed flight, with Lieutenant Colonel Pete Everest achieving speeds up to Mach 2.53 in May 1956. On May 25th, Captain Ivan C. Kincello piloted the X-2 for the first time, successfully completing a supersonic flight despite having to shut down the engine prematurely due to a malfunction. In June, the aircraft underwent modifications, including the installation of engine nozzle extensions to enhance performance. Everest conducted a supersonic checkout flight of the modified X-2 on July 12th. His final flight in the X-2 on July 23, 1956, saw him achieve a speed of Mach 2.87 at an altitude of 68,000 feet, earning him the title of Fastest Man Alive. Following Everest's departure, Kincello assumed the role of X-2 project pilot, conducting high-altitude missions. On August 3, 1956, he successfully climbed to 87,750 feet while gathering stability data. On the same day, NACA Director Hugh L. Dryden requested the loan of the X-2 for research purposes. While the Air Force continued to fly the X-2 in pursuit of its maximum altitude capability, Kincello achieved a remarkable altitude of 126,200 feet on September 7, 1956, earning him the title of First of the Spacemen. This altitude record stood until the X-15 program. Despite several additional flight attempts, Kincello encountered aborts, concluding his remarkable achievements in the X-2. The tragic loss of Captain Milburn G. Mel Apt during his historic flight in the X-2 on September 27, 1956, marked a somber moment in the program's history. Apt's flight, which saw him become the first person to fly faster than 3 times the speed of sound, reaching a speed of 2,094 miles per hour, Mach 3.196, was a remarkable achievement in high-speed flight research. However, the elation of this milestone was overshadowed by the sudden turn of events as Apt initiated a sharp turn back towards Edwards, leading to a control divergence known as inertial coupling. The X-2 began tumbling uncontrollably, and despite Apt's efforts to jettison the escape capsule, he was unable to extract himself before the capsule struck the ground. Apt's untimely death served as a poignant reminder of the risks inherent in pushing the boundaries of aerospace research and exploration. His legacy, however, lives on as a testament to the courage and dedication of those who endeavor to advance our understanding of high-speed flight and aerospace technology. The F-15 Eagle indeed holds a special place in the history of American military aviation. Introduced in the 1970s, it has consistently proven itself as a formidable air superiority fighter, with an unmatched record of aerial victories and a reputation for performance excellence. Designed to excel in dogfights and to maintain air superiority, the F-15 has demonstrated exceptional speed, agility, and weapon-carrying capabilities. Its powerful engines, advanced avionics, and robust airframe make it a potent force in both air-to-air combat and air-to-ground missions. Over the years, the F-15 has undergone several upgrades and variants, ensuring its relevance and effectiveness in modern warfare scenarios. The F-15E Strike Eagle, for example, is a dual-role fighter capable of both air-to-air and air-to-ground missions, further enhancing the aircraft's versatility and combat capability. Despite the emergence of newer aircraft like the F-35 Lightning II, the F-15 Eagle remains an integral part of the US Air Force's fleet, providing unmatched air superiority capabilities and serving as a symbol of American military aviation prowess. Absolutely, the F-15 Eagle emerged during this intense period of geopolitical competition, and it was a direct response to the need for a superior air combat platform. As both the United States and the Soviet Union sought to outmatch each other in military technology, the development of high-performance fighter jets became paramount. In this context, the F-15 was conceived as a way to maintain air superiority in the face of evolving threats. Its design prioritized speed, maneuverability, and firepower, ensuring that it could effectively engage and defeat enemy aircraft in aerial combat scenarios. The F-15's legendary status stems from its exceptional performance characteristics. With its powerful engines, advanced avionics, and agile airframe, it could outmaneuver and outgun virtually any adversary it encountered. Its combination of speed and agility earned it the reputation of being able to turn on a dime, making it a formidable opponent in dogfights. Furthermore, the F-15's versatility allowed it to adapt to various mission requirements, ranging from air superiority and interception to ground attack and reconnaissance. This flexibility made it a valuable asset for the US military, capable of fulfilling a wide range of roles with precision and effectiveness. Overall, the F-15 Eagle's legacy as a legend of the skies is rooted in its unparalleled performance, adaptability, and reliability, which have ensured its continued relevance in modern military operations. Indeed, the development of new fighter jets during the Vietnam War was driven by the urgent need to counter the threat posed by adversary aircraft, particularly the Soviet-built MiG-21s and the emerging Mig-25 Foxbat. The agility and speed of these enemy fighters presented a significant challenge for American pilots, leading to a concerted effort to design and deploy more capable aircraft. McDonnell Douglas's success in securing the contract for the new fighter, which would eventually become the F-15 Eagle, marked a pivotal moment in military aviation history. The F-15 was specifically engineered to excel in air combat, with a focus on speed, maneuverability, and firepower. The fixed delta wings and vertical stabilizers of the F-15 were integral to its design, providing the necessary aerodynamic characteristics for high-speed flight and agile maneuvering. Combined with powerful twin engines, the F-15 boasted exceptional performance capabilities, allowing it to effectively engage and defeat enemy aircraft in aerial combat scenarios. The F-15's inaugural flights in 1972 marked the beginning of a new era in air superiority, with the aircraft quickly demonstrating its formidable capabilities during testing and evaluation. Its successful development and deployment paved the way for a new generation of fighter jets that would dominate the skies for decades to come. The evolution of the F-15 Eagle series, spanning several generations, underscores its enduring significance in modern military aviation. From its initial deployment in the mid-1970s, the F-15 has undergone continuous development and improvement to maintain its status as one of the world's premier fighter jets. The introduction of successive models, including the F-15AB, F-15CD, and the F-15E Strike Eagle, reflects a commitment to enhancing the aircraft's capabilities to meet evolving operational requirements. Despite these advancements, the fundamental design of the F-15's airframe has remained consistent, a testament to its enduring effectiveness and versatility. Key specifications highlight the F-15's formidable performance attributes. With a length of approximately 64 feet and a wingspan of 43 feet, the aircraft offers a spacious cockpit environment for its crew. Its unfueled weight of 31,700 pounds allows for agile maneuverability, while a maximum takeoff weight of 68,000 pounds accommodates extensive weapon payloads. The Pratt & Whitney F100P220 turbofan engines powering the F-15 deliver impressive thrust capabilities, enabling the aircraft to achieve speeds of up to 1,875 miles per hour, or Mach 2.5. These engines also provide a range of up to 2,173 nautical miles and enable operations at altitudes of up to 65,000 feet, ensuring the F-15's versatility across a wide range of mission profiles. Overall, the F-15 Eagle's enduring legacy as a high-performance fighter jet underscores its continued relevance in contemporary military operations, reflecting a blend of proven design excellence and ongoing technological innovation. The F-15's impressive speed and agility, coupled with its advanced avionics and weapon systems, make it a formidable force in aerial combat. As the fastest fighter jet ever deployed by the American military, its ability to accelerate vertically immediately after takeoff sets it apart from its contemporaries. The F-15A's introduction of pioneering technologies such as the head-up display and advanced avionics laid the foundation for subsequent upgrades that have kept the aircraft at the forefront of aerial warfare. These enhancements have ensured that the F-15 remains capable and competitive against evolving threats. While its sleek design and impressive performance may capture attention, it's essential to remember that the F-15 is fundamentally a combat aircraft designed for military operations. Equipped with a range of weapons, including an internal 20mm multi-barrel gun for close-range engagements, the F-15 is prepared for various mission scenarios. The F-15E Strike Eagle, the latest iteration of the F-15 series, boasts a diverse arsenal of weapons, including guided air-to-air missiles deployed on its hardpoints. These advanced weapons systems provide the Strike Eagle with lethal precision and effectiveness in modern conflicts, where dogfights are rare and long-range engagements are more common. In summary, the F-15 Eagle's combination of speed, agility, advanced avionics, and potent weaponry makes it a versatile and formidable asset in the American military's arsenal, capable of meeting the challenges of contemporary warfare with unparalleled effectiveness. The F-15E Strike Eagle's versatility extends to its ability to carry a variety of air-to-surface weapons, including the GBU-15 glide bomb. Equipped with real-time guidance, the GBU-15 can be directed while in flight, allowing for precise targeting. Originally used by both the F-15E and the F-111F Nighthawk, the retirement of the F-111F has made the GBU-15 exclusive to the F-15 platform. While squadrons of F-15s were formed in the 1970s, they saw limited action for many years. However, the aircraft's combat prowess was showcased during the Gulf War, specifically Operation Desert Storm in Iraq. Remarkably, not a single F-15 was lost due to enemy action during this conflict, with all losses attributed to accidents. Since its introduction, F-15 pilots have confirmed 104 kills in air-to-air combat engagements. During Operation Desert Shield, which preceded Desert Storm, coalition forces achieved 44 air-to-air victories over Iraqi forces, with 40 of those victories attributed to various versions of the F-15. In a notable engagement during NATO operations over Kosovo in 1999, Captain Jeff "Claw" Hwang demonstrated the F-15's effectiveness by shooting down 2 Mig-29 Fulcrums with AIM-120 missiles while piloting an F-15C. For his actions, Captain Hwang was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross, highlighting the aircraft's continued importance in modern aerial operations. The F-15's role in military operations continued into the 21st century with Operation Enduring Freedom, which commenced in 2001 with the invasion of Afghanistan and later extended to Iraq. F-15s played a crucial part in these operations, with some aircraft conducting daily missions equipped with Handle 5,000-pound bunker buster bombs or AGM-130 guided missiles. In a remarkable incident during Israeli training exercises in 1983, an F-15 was involved in a mid-air collision that resulted in one of its wings being torn off. Despite the severe damage, the pilots, unaware of the extent of the loss, managed to land the aircraft safely with just one wing remaining. While many military aircraft designed decades ago have become obsolete, the F-15 remains relevant and continues to be manufactured. Boeing has taken over production after merging with McDonnell Douglas. The F-15E Strike Eagle represents the most advanced version, equipped with cutting-edge avionics and enhanced targeting systems. While the USAF intends to keep some of its newer F-15E aircraft in service, it's also looking towards the future with the development of the F-15EX Eagle II. This newer version will come equipped with various enhancements, including the Open Mission System (OMS), allowing for easy upgrades with future updates, and helmet-mounted situational awareness displays. The acquisition process for the F-15EX is already underway, although delivery of the first batch has been delayed. Nevertheless, these aircraft are expected to enter service sometime in 2024, ensuring the USAF remains equipped with advanced and capable fighter jets for its missions. The longevity of the F-15 is indeed remarkable, especially in an era where technological advancements often lead to the retirement of older aircraft. While some iconic planes, like the F-14 Tomcat, have been phased out, the F-15 has continued to evolve with upgrades and improvements, ensuring its relevance on the modern battlefield. The upcoming F-15EX Eagle II represents the latest iteration of this enduring aircraft, incorporating cutting-edge technology and enhancements across its systems. With features such as fly-by-wire flight controls, electronic warfare capabilities, and powerful engines, the F-15EX will offer enhanced performance and capabilities compared to its predecessors. Furthermore, its advanced radar system will enable pilots to track multiple targets simultaneously with precision, further enhancing its effectiveness in combat scenarios. Overall, the F-15's adaptability and continuous upgrades ensure that it will remain a vital asset to military readiness for years to come. Absolutely, the inclusion of advanced systems like the Joint Helmet-Mounted Queuing System 2 further enhances the pilot's situational awareness and combat effectiveness. Additionally, the development of the Silent Eagle variant, incorporating stealth technologies, demonstrates the adaptability of the F-15 platform to incorporate modern features while retaining its core capabilities. Indeed, in a landscape dominated by stealth fighters, the F-15's cost-effectiveness and versatility make it a valuable asset for scenarios where stealth may not be the decisive factor. Its lower operational and acquisition costs make it an attractive option for missions where other factors such as payload capacity and range are prioritized over stealth. As a result, the F-15 continues to serve as a formidable fourth-generation fighter, ensuring that its legacy endures and that it remains a vital component of military air power for the foreseeable future. The spy satellite images depicting the massive Soviet aircraft sparked alarm within the Pentagon. The dimensions of the aircraft, with engine intakes resembling small cars and wings of considerable size, suggested capabilities surpassing those of America's leading aircraft, such as the McDonnell F-4 Phantom II. These prototypes mark the early stages of what would later become known as the Mikoyan-Gurevich Mig-25 Foxbat. Following its public debut in July 1967, including speeds up to 1,852 miles per hour and altitudes exceeding 123,520 feet, the MiG-25 appeared to present a formidable challenge to Western superiority, particularly against the Mach 3.2 Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird spyplane. However, the perception of the MiG-25 as a technological marvel eventually proved deceptive. In reality, it fell short of the hype surrounding it, akin to a Potemkin village. The surveillance failure, reminiscent of the missile gap exploited by John F. Kennedy during his presidential campaign in 1960, also contributed to the exaggerated fear of the Foxbat's capabilities. Nevertheless, the MiG-25 served its purpose as an interceptor, effectively deterring the SR-71 from entering Soviet airspace for several years. This uncertainty surrounding the true potential of the MiG-25 persisted in Western military circles for some time, emphasizing its significant impact despite its eventual shortcomings. The Mig-25 Foxbat commanded attention not only for its purported capabilities, but also for its sheer size, comparable to World War II heavy bombers. Towering over technicians and ground crews in photographs, it conveyed an imposing presence despite its rudimentary appearance. However, the Soviet approach to constructing the Foxbat differed significantly from Western counterparts due to limitations in titanium technology. While titanium was essential for high-speed flight due to its resistance to the heat generated by skin friction at supersonic speeds, the Soviets lacked the expertise and tools to work with this material effectively. Instead, they resorted to stainless steel, despite its weight disadvantages compared to aluminum. As a result, the MiG-25's fuselage consisted of a single welded steel fuel tank aft of the cockpit. The use of steel presented challenges in craftsmanship, with some observers mistaking factory-fresh skinning for crude repair patches. Despite its unconventional construction, the Foxbat was designed to fulfill its strategic role, targeting high-altitude Western bombers like the Convair B-58 Hustler and the North American B-70 Valkyrie. The Soviet Union's reliance on ground control for virtually all aspects of the Foxbat's operation reflected their centralized command structure. Pilots were tasked with executing predetermined missions under strict guidance, highlighting the USSR's preference for centralized control over individual initiative. The US strategic response to the introduction of the MiG-25 Foxbat and advancements in Soviet air defenses led to a significant shift in tactics. The emergence of more advanced surface-to-air missiles, SAMs, made high-altitude penetration missions into Soviet airspace increasingly perilous for bombers. In response, Strategic Air Command (SAC) revised its tactics, emphasizing low-altitude, high-speed, and stealthy approaches to evade enemy defenses. This shift in strategy led to the retirement of the Convair B-58 Hustler and the cancellation of the North American B-70 Valkyrie, both of which were designed for high-altitude, high-speed operations. The new approach required aircraft to fly low to the ground, reducing their radar cross-section and minimizing exposure to enemy radar and SAMs. The MiG-25's performance was largely dictated by its engines, particularly the Tumansky R-15. While the engine design lacked sophistication, its unique 3-ring afterburner fuel nozzles allowed for efficient operation in sustained supersonic flight. At high speeds, the engine functioned akin to a ramjet, with much of the intake air bypassing the low-pressure compressor and feeding directly into the afterburner. However, sustaining high speeds imposed significant challenges on jet engines, particularly regarding air intake. At speeds exceeding Mach 2, the engine intake faces immense pressure, necessitating careful design to regulate airflow and prevent engine damage. Lockheed's solution for regulating air intake on the SR-71 involved movable cones within each engine's intake, which adjusted their position based on the aircraft's speed. As the SR-71 accelerated, these cones moved inward to restrict excessive airflow into the engine. In contrast, the Mig-25 attempted a similar approach, with movable ramps in its intakes, but they proved ineffective at the aircraft's highest speeds. The tremendous airflow demanded significant fuel flow, causing the engines to overheat and malfunction. Despite the limitations of the engines, the Mig-25 showcased the best of Soviet metallurgical capabilities at the time. However, the engines were not capable of sustaining speeds beyond Mach 2.83, which was considered the aircraft's operational top speed. Attempts to push the aircraft to its theoretical top speed of Mach 3.2 resulted in catastrophic engine failures, with the cause being literally sucked out of the tailpipe. Nevertheless, the Mig-25 inadvertently influenced the development of American fighter aircraft. Concerns over the capabilities of the Mig-25 prompted the US Air Force to accelerate the development of a new air superiority fighter, initially designated the FX. This competition led to the creation of the F-15 Eagle, designed by McDonnell Douglas. The F-15, intended to surpass the capabilities of the Mig-25, became one of the most successful air superiority fighters in history, boasting an impressive record of 104 shootdowns without a single loss in air-to-air combat. The Mig-25, despite its flaws, had a unique feature that endeared it to the Russian personnel who maintained it: its unconventional air conditioning system. This system relied on the evaporation of a mixture of distilled water and nearly 240 litres of near-pure grain alcohol. After missions, Mig-25s would often return with some of this concoction still in its tank, but the airborne vodka quickly found its way into the canteens of mechanics. The convenience of refilling the system from small bowsers with spigots further contributed to its popularity among maintenance crews. It's no wonder the Mig-25 earned the nickname Flying Restaurant due to this unusual feature. The Mig-31, known as the Foxhound by NATO, was developed by the Soviet Union in response to the perceived threat posed by NATO low-level strike aircraft and cruise missiles. It was designed as a successor to the Mig-25 Foxbat high-altitude interceptor and aimed to address some of the shortcomings of its predecessor. One of the key advantages of the Mig-31 was its ability to operate at low altitudes, a capability lacking in the Mig-25. Additionally, the Mig-31 featured more efficient engines that allowed for greater combat range at supersonic speeds, addressing a limitation of the Mig-25. The new aircraft also aimed to mitigate the issue of engine failure at high speeds experienced by the Mig-25. The development of the Mig-31 began with the YE-155MP prototype, which conducted its maiden flight in 1975. Production of the final model commenced in 1979, and by 1982 it had been incorporated into the Soviet military's anti-air defense regiment. As advancements were made, the Soviets pursued the development of the Mig-31M, an upgraded variant capable of launching long-range R-37 missiles with a range of up to 200 kilometers, as well as R-77 medium-range air-to-air missiles. These enhancements further solidified the Mig-31's role as a crucial component of the Soviet Air Force's arsenal. The Mig-31 continues to serve as a vital asset in the Russian Air Force, frequently deployed in various operations, including recent events such as the invasion of Ukraine. Its longevity is a testament to its enduring relevance and effectiveness, with plans for its retirement extending well into the 2040s. The evolution of the Mig-31 saw several iterations aimed at enhancing its capabilities, although some projects were hindered by budget constraints and geopolitical changes. The Mig-31M, equipped with the Zaslon M radar, upgraded avionics, and more powerful engines, represented a significant advancement. However, production of this model was halted due to financial limitations towards the end of the Soviet Union. Subsequent variants, such as the Mig-31B, continued to improve upon the platform's capabilities, featuring enhancements like improved radar systems, digital processors, and advanced air-to-air missiles like the R-33S. Existing aircraft upgraded to this standard were designated Mig-31BS. The development of specialized versions, such as the Mig-31D anti-satellite variant, showcased the aircraft's versatility in adapting to different mission requirements. The introduction of the Mig-31BM in 1998 marked a significant milestone in the development of the aircraft, addressing previous shortcomings while introducing new capabilities. Building upon earlier concepts like the Mig-31F, which focused on multi-role capabilities, the Mig-31BM emerged as a versatile platform capable of ground attack missions, long-range interceptions, precision strikes, and defense suppression tasks. One of the key advancements of the Mig-31BM was its ground attack capabilities, a departure from its previous role primarily as an interceptor. Equipped with advanced cockpit displays and the Zaslon AM radar with enhanced range, operators could effectively deploy precision-guided missiles, expanding the aircraft's operational versatility. Furthermore, the Mig-31BM's ability to function as an early warning aircraft and airborne command unit added strategic value to its role in coordinating aerial operations. By leveraging its radar capabilities and data link systems, the Mig-31BM could provide crucial radar information to multiple sources and coordinate the movements of other aircraft with less advanced radar technology. The upgrade to the Mig-31BM standard also extended the operational life of the aircraft by an additional 15 years, ensuring its continued relevance in modern air defense strategies. As of 2017, a significant portion of Russia's interceptor fleet had been updated to the Mig-31B and Mig-31BMS configurations, reflecting the aircraft's enduring importance in the country's air defense capabilities. The announcement of a further life extension program for the Mig-31 Foxhounds in July 2020 underscores Russia's commitment to modernizing its air defense capabilities and ensuring the continued relevance of this formidable interceptor aircraft. In addition to its traditional role as an interceptor, a modern variant known as the Mig-31K has been developed, specifically modified to carry KH-47M2 Kinzhal air-launched hypersonic cruise missiles. With a remarkable speed of Mach 10 and a range of 2,000 kilometers, these missiles provide the Mig-31K with enhanced strike capabilities, further enhancing its versatility in contemporary warfare scenarios. The Mig-31 Foxhound boasts impressive dimensions, with a length of 22.69 meters and a height of 6.15 meters, and a maximum takeoff weight of 46,000 kilograms, making it the heaviest combat jet ever constructed for air-to-air combat. Its aerodynamic design, characterized by a streamlined body and delta wings, enables it to achieve high speeds, particularly at low altitudes. Constructed primarily from nickel steel, titanium, aluminum alloy, and composite materials, the Mig-31's airframe is designed to withstand the rigors of high-speed flight and combat operations. The delta wings feature square tips and a negative slant, enhancing lift and maneuverability compared to its predecessor, the Mig-25. Equipped with 4 underwing pylons and fuel tanks capable of holding a total volume of 5,000 liters, the Mig-31 has ample capacity for carrying external stores and fuel for extended missions. Its Solovyev D30 F6 turbofan engines, each providing a takeoff thrust of 15,500 kilograms, enable it to achieve a top speed of approximately Mach 3, ensuring rapid response and interception capabilities. With impressive climb and range capabilities, including a climb rate of 208 meters per second, a ferry range of 3,300 kilometers, and a combat range of 720 kilometers, the Mig-31 remains a formidable asset in Russia's air defense arsenal, capable of effectively countering airborne threats in various operational scenarios. The Mig-31 Foxhound indeed represents a pinnacle of technological innovation, featuring a sophisticated cockpit equipped with state-of-the-art digital avionics systems. The cockpit incorporates liquid crystal displays, LCDs, that provide pilots with clear instrument readings and radar information, ensuring optimal situational awareness during flight operations. At the heart of the MiG-31's avionics suite is the formidable N007 Zaslon radar, renowned for its exceptional capabilities. In its latest iteration, this radar system can scan up to 200 kilometers in all directions, effectively providing comprehensive coverage of the airspace. It boasts the ability to simultaneously track up to 10 targets and engage up to 4 of them concurrently if they fall within its operational range. Operated by the weapons system officer seated in the rear cockpit, the Zaslon radar is not only capable of detecting airborne threats, but also of receiving signals from early warning radar systems and airborne command and control platforms. Utilizing electronic beam steering technology, the radar antenna can be swiftly and precisely directed to maximize coverage and enhance target acquisition capabilities. Moreover, the MiG-31 features advanced sensor systems that further augment its situational awareness and threat detection capabilities. The Track While Scan (TWS) radar enables the aircraft to detect and track multiple radar-emitting targets simultaneously, whether airborne or ground-based. Additionally, the Infrared Search and Track (IRST) system enables the MiG-31 to passively detect and track heat signatures emitted by enemy aircraft and helicopters, enhancing its ability to engage targets effectively. With its integrated suite of advanced avionics and sensor systems, the Mig-31 Foxhound stands as a formidable interceptor aircraft, capable of maintaining air superiority and countering a wide range of airborne threats in modern combat scenarios. The Mig-31 Foxhound indeed possesses a formidable arsenal of weapons and advanced systems, making it a highly lethal platform in combat situations. In addition to its advanced radar and sensor suite, the aircraft is equipped with a Radar Warning Receiver (RWR) system, which provides real-time alerts to the operator regarding incoming threats. This capability allows the crew to react promptly to potential threats, enhancing the aircraft's survivability in hostile environments. Furthermore, the MiG-31's digital interference communication system enables seamless communication and data sharing among groups of aircraft, facilitating coordinated operations and enhancing situational awareness on the battlefield. This capability enables MiG-31s to exchange tactical information in real time and collaborate effectively with other friendly forces. Regarding its armament, the MiG-31 carries a diverse array of air-to-air missiles tailored for various engagement scenarios. The long-range Vinepol R-33 missiles provide the aircraft with the capability to engage high-speed and distant targets effectively. The MiG-31 can also be armed with the AA-12 Adder missile and various Russian-made air-to-air ground missiles, including the AS Krypton anti-radiation missile, providing the aircraft with multi-role capabilities. To complement its missile armament, the MiG-31 is equipped with a potent built-in cannon, the GSH-623 gun, capable of delivering a high volume of fire. Overall, the MiG-31 Foxhound's combination of advanced avionics, robust weapons systems, and formidable firepower make it a formidable adversary in aerial combat and a key asset in Russia's air defense arsenal. The MiG-31 has indeed been a significant asset in Russia's air defense capabilities, with a substantial number still in service, both in Russia and in Kazakhstan. However, its commercial success has been limited, with few export orders and cancellations of potential deals, such as the contract with Syria in 2007. Despite its commercial challenges, the MiG-31 has played a role in various conflicts, including the Russo-Ukrainian War, where it has been utilized for combat missions. Despite its commercial challenges, the MiG-31 has played a role in various conflicts, including the Russo-Ukrainian War, where it has been utilized for combat missions. Its participation in such conflicts underscores its continued relevance and effectiveness in modern warfare scenarios. Looking ahead, Russia's plans for the MiG-41, set to be a successor to the MiG-31, indicate the country's commitment to advancing its air defense capabilities. With anticipated improvements in speed and weaponry, including directed energy weapons, the MiG-41 aims to maintain Russia's edge in aerial combat for the foreseeable future.
Yes, we have an ejection. We have an ejection. The aircraft is descending over the North Base area. I have a chute. The pilot's out of the seat and the chute is good. Copy.
We had a highly competent team, very experienced, many flights under their belt. We had a number of pilots that flew the airplane. The pilot in particular that was flying that day had been on the program from the very beginning, highly experienced with the X-31.
Each mishap has its own set of circumstances and its own sequence of events. But you find similar issues: communications, complacency, assumptions that haven't been warranted, human frailties. And you have to account for these things in a program.
This is like a chain. You make a chain when you have any of these accidents, a chain of events. Any link of the chain, if it were broken, you would not have an accident.
This was the A-team. We had the best people from every discipline, from every organization, and we lost an airplane. So if it can happen to the best team, it can happen to any team.
The X-31 research effort began in the late 1980s as an international program involving DARPA, the U.S. Navy, Deutsche Aerospace, the German Federal Ministry of Defense, and Rockwell International. The program's goal was to explore the tactical utility of a thrust-vectored aircraft with advanced flight control systems.
The X-31 was a real pioneering program. And in fact, the X-31 program pretty much wrote the book on thrust vectoring, along with its sister program, the F-18 HARV.
The initial X-31 flight tests were conducted at Rockwell's facility in Palmdale, California. But in 1992, NASA and the U.S. Air Force joined the X-31 research team, and the test flight program was moved to the Dryden Flight Research Center on Edwards Air Force Base. And before too long, the X-31 was turning in some extremely impressive results. By any measure, the X-31 was a highly successful program. It regularly flew several flights a day, accumulating over 550 flights during the course of the program, with a superlative safety record. And yet, on the 19th of January 1995, on the very last scheduled flight of the X-31's ship number 1, disaster struck.
This particular flight had been on the books for some time to get done, and it was, by our standards, an absolutely routine flight.
We were not expanding the envelope. We were not trying anything new. We were flying a new pitot-static tube, but this was in a routine mission, a routine task, routine flight environment with an experienced pilot and experienced crew.
But while the flight was routine, there had been some changes to the configuration of the X-31 since its initial flights. In particular, the original pitot tube, which supplies airspeed information to the plane's flight control computers, had been replaced with another kind of pitot tube known as a keel probe. The keel probe gave more accurate airspeed data at high angles of attack. but it was more vulnerable to icing, especially since the keel probe on the X-31 did not have any pitot heat.
We were never to fly the airplane in ice. That was a prohibited maneuver. So if you're prohibited from flying in ice, you don't need a heater.
Normally, the conditions at Edwards are warm and dry enough that icing, or pitot heat, isn't a concern. But January 19, 1995 was not a normal day.
The unusual part of the day was we had a high humidity at altitude, actually conducive for freezing conditions. And the airplane was operated for in and out of some fairly high moisture content for extended periods of time. Led to some indications in the cockpit and the control room that it was causing problems with the air data system.
This particular airplane had a limit to not fly through clouds, through visible moisture. That day, we were flying very close to and occasionally in and out of very thin cirrus cloud. It didn't particularly worry me because everything seemed to be going along quite normally.
But some minutes, like 5, before the airplane went out of control and the pilot jumped out, the pilot observed that there was some moisture around where he was. So he turned the pitot heat switch on. Now, clearly when he turned the pitot heat switch on, he expected that the pitot heat would be working. About 2.5 minutes later, which is 2.5 minutes before the accident, he mentioned that fact to the control room.
Okay, remind me, I just put the pitot heat on. Remind me to put it off. Copy that.
Ready? The pitot heat's not hooked up on a keel probe.
Stop it. You got an enable on?
Mysteriously, to this day, the control room gave him no response. They had an internal discussion as the clock clicked down, and internally it was commented that the pitot heat was not hooked up.
But this vital piece of information was not relayed to the pilot for more than 2 minutes. And even when it was, the information was not stated as clearly or strongly as it could have been.
And pitot heat. Well, leave it on for a moment. Yeah, we think it may not be hooked up. It may not be hooked up. That's good. I like that.
We had side discussions that should have been going on the intercom so that everybody in the control room was part of the conversation. Instead, we'd pulled our headsets aside so that we could talk to each other because we were sitting adjacent to each other. And that's another part of just control room discipline that we broke down on.
Meanwhile, the first signs of trouble were beginning to appear. So now,
the pilot sees an anomaly in his airspeed. It's at 20 degrees angle of attack, and he can see that. And he says to the ground, and I briefed this many times, he said, "I'm at 277, I mean 207 knots.
And the airspeed is off. I'm reading 277 knots at 20 AOA. Okay, picked up this.
Well, anybody that's been on the program, and lots of people have been on many years, would know that 20 degrees angle of attack is somewhere around 135 knots, 140 knots, doesn't matter. It's not 207 knots.
Apparently, no one in the control room caught the possible significance of that discrepancy. And perhaps even more importantly, neither did the chase pilot, for the simple reason that he couldn't hear any of the pilot's transmissions.
We had a mechanism of hot mic, very important to the pilot in the X-31, that he'd be able to talk to the control room without having to press buttons at certain key times, especially at high angle of attack, which was not going to be a factor in this flight because it was going to go to about 20 degrees angle of attack. But it was a general operating procedure that was compounded because our hot mic system didn't work always very well. And when it didn't work, it put a lot of static in the earphones of the chase pilot who wanted to hear the hot mic to know what's going on.
So it was the one-sided nature of the communication that kept me from having the situational awareness to be able to step in and say, hey, I'm reading X knots, and you guys are reading Y knots, and these two numbers should be the same, and they're not.
The X-31 did indeed have an air data problem. The unheated keel probe had frozen over in the cool, moist conditions, causing it to start giving incorrect airspeed information to the X-31's flight control computers.
In terms of the accepted risk, the failure of the pedostatic system, or damage to it, was well known. It was well understood. The pilot himself had simulated the failure in simulations before we even got the airplane. And it probably helped him understand that he had to get out of the airplane because the time is short when the airplane is diverging.
And we went through quite a thorough review of the hazards that we knew or could come up with based upon the design of the flight control system. And we thought we had a good handle on that. We thought we could lose the whole nose boom. We could take a bird strike, wipe out the whole nose boom, and fly home safe. As a result of that, we thought we had a pretty robust system.
The reason the team thought they had a robust system was the X-31's flight control system was designed with 3 backup reversionary modes the pilot could select in the event of an air data problem or other systems failures.
So in the case of if you saw something that was not right, or the control room saw something that was not right with respect to the airspeed system, they could tell the pilot to go to R3.
R3 was a reversionary mode that would have removed within 2 seconds the airspeed data inputs into the flight control system. The control surface response to pilot inputs would then be independent of airspeed, allowing the airplane to remain controllable for the remainder of the flight back to the landing.
The accepted risk was probably reasonable, but here's the kicker. The consequences of a failure are so high here that you really needed to put some special attention on this. The designer did by putting R3 in.
But nobody on the test team, including the pilot, realized that the X-31 was experiencing an air data problem that would require implementing the R3 reversionary system.
For several minutes, we had indications that the airspeed was becoming poor, both in the cockpit and the control room. And in our last-ditch catch, nobody stood up and yelled, "Wait a minute, this can't be right."
Because had we realized what was going on, the control system had the ability to go to fixed flight control gains, and with fixed flight control gains, it would not have been a problem. They would have been able to land the airplane safely, but we just never got enough information to make the decision to do that.
We had an alternate airspeed indicator that used a different pitot tube, which would be less susceptible to icing than this special tube. It was at the pilot's right-hand knee, and he never looked at it. We had a lack of attention to the reversionary modes. Gradually, we were not thinking. We learned to depend on the control room. They're going to tell us when we need to go to R2 or R1 or R3. We need to know as pilots, which we kind of forgot, where are the safety nets? The safety nets, push the right button, didn't get the test data, but you bring the aircraft back. So if you didn't understand what was happening, we should have been constantly reminded, push the button and talk about it.
Pilot obviously wasn't concerned. His experience, probably, if you look at the control room, the pilot, and everybody involved in that day's activity, he was the most experienced X-31 in that day's activity. He had been on a program since Palmdale. So he noticed something, but he wasn't concerned. So, and he didn't ask for help that I was aware of. And so I think the control room said, well, he's not that panicked, I'm not that panicked. And I think that fed off each other a little bit.
The team moved on to the final test point of the day, a simple automatic control response test that required only a command from the pilot to initiate. But once again, the airplane did not respond as expected.
He hits the box, presses the button, and he says, I don't get anything. Well, he didn't get anything because the box was designed not to put any input if you went beyond a certain speed, like 200 knots. So it was seeing the false airspeed of 200 plus knots. And when he pushed the button, it didn't work.
3, 2, 1, go. Doesn't do anything.
But it didn't work because something was wrong. And the control room came back and finally just kind of ignored that and said, it's all okay, RTB now.
It's almost like expecting to hear that went fine. After this program with hundreds of flights and everything going perfectly, in your mind, you're hearing things that weren't happening. Everything's fine, worked fine, let's come home.
The normal operation of the system was expected that the system would identify the problems itself, that it would not be the people on the ground identifying an air data problem and calling for fixed gains. Although it was certainly capable of putting that, the expectation would be that the system would do its own self-diagnosis and identify failures.
But the failure we had was a slow failure of the tube, slowly building the ice up. So the changes in the speed were within perfectly reasonable numbers for a real airplane. Software is just not capable of detecting that failure for that system.
There was one or two people that actually knew that there was these little tiny areas that, it couldn't handle it, but that word never got out. They never stood up and said, boss, that's not quite right. You can handle it over 95 or 99% of the area, but there's really a couple little areas the automated system can't handle it. And that didn't come out till after the accident. I never did get to talk to them about it, but I just kind of felt they didn't want to stop the program, thought it was of no real issue because of the difficulty of getting to such a small area of the envelope.
But as the X-31 began to descend on its return to base, the problems caused by the failure of its air data system became far more pronounced.
We have frozen the pitot tube now, and it's stuck. It's got what it had in it, and it's going to hold that pressure. Now when you start down with a frozen pitot tube, the airspeed, what you see, the false airspeed that he saw, will decrease as he decreases altitude. But we are seeing, the control room is seeing, they have a big display, this big. The pilot is seeing every time he turns his head, he's seeing the airspeed in the HUD. And now it's perhaps at one point, it's at 150 knots. It cannot be at 150 knots. And then it's at 100 knots. And it cannot be at 100 knots. And going on down, it finally, right just before the accident, it gets to 48 knots, which is the minimum it's going to read. But the control system in the airplane is getting this wrong information. And this is a complex closed loop system, and when you put too much gain in, it will start to get unstable and it will start moving the controls, which it did a matter of seconds. And finally, it dramatically pitches up. The pilot, of course, tries to prevent that, and I'm sure the instant that he hit the forward stop and realized he was out of control, he did the natural thing, was eject from the airplane.
We were RTB, return to base, and I started to rejoin on the X-31. As I came up on his right side, about 100 yards away and closing, I saw the airplane start to go into a small wing rock that progressively got larger and larger. And as I got within about 200 feet of him, the airplane pitched up vertical. And approximately the time that I passed to beam him, I saw the pilot eject.
Okay, NASA 1, we have an ejection. We have an ejection. NASA 1, do you read?
Yeah, we copy, Dana. We copy.
As sport, as A584 has ejected the aircraft is ascending over the north base area. I have a shoot. Sport, that's 850. How do you read? 850. Yes, sir. That's 584 has ejected from his aircraft. The aircraft is descending north of North Base. The pilot is in the chute at this time, descending approximately 1 mile north of North Base.
So there was the knowledge and training in the simulation that taught the pilot when he started seeing the airplane was oscillating, was not controlled, he knew that he had to get out of the airplane very fast or else the airplane would go into a tumble. And he did do that, and that saved his life. I also know that the pilot, as he was ejecting from the airplane, had thoughts of maybe I should have tried a reversionary mode. But at that point, if he would have hesitated any longer, he would have been probably lost with the airplanes.
I did not connect until after the plane departed. And while the plane was tumbling, I made the connection. Pitot system had to be frozen. And just didn't come to the realization soon enough to do anything about it in the control room.
Less than 4 minutes after the first comment about pitot heat was recorded between the pilot and the control room, the X-31 crashed just north of Edwards Air Force Base. How could such a routine operation have ended in disaster when flights with far higher risk had been completed safely? And more importantly, what can we learn from the answers to that question?
Every person involved in an experimental flight research program should actually study the mishaps of all experimental aircraft in the past 20 to 30 years. There's a lot of things you can learn because human nature doesn't change, the processes don't change. It's always the same set of contributing factors, just the names and the details change. Of the 10 things, for example, that I describe as contributing causes of the mishap, 6 of them occurred prior to the day of flight. 4 occurred within about 2 minutes. So we had a better chance of working on the 6 than we did on the 4.
In some senses, the X-31 accident started 6 years earlier when the plane was first developed and tested at Rockwell.
We had a hazard analysis from the initial design, and in the accident that had to actually get dusted off. You should never have to dust off one of those. Everybody familiar with the program, at all those levels need to have a really good, comfortable feeling of what those hazards are and what is accepted in the risk. There was a redo of that analysis as we moved to NASA in '92, and I think and it was clear after the accident, not everybody really understood what that design was to the detail you needed to understand the full risk of the program. Clearly, from 1990 to 95, you have a large team turnover. We changed locations. We expanded the objectives of the program. And as time rolls on and the new people come in, not everybody has the same understanding or appreciation of the kind of vehicle we're operating. It's a special airplane. It's not the same risk as any other airplane. And to operate it every day, you really ought to have the same appreciation for the risk. And I don't think we as a team did a good job of keeping everybody that came to the program with the same level of understanding of both the design and the risk on the airplane. We shouldn't have had a control room, a pilot, and a team that day that didn't understand that fundamental fact. And it's not elaborate, it's just straightforward. The airspeed I see in the HUD is the airspeed the computer uses. If the airspeed I see has got a problem, the airplane's got a problem. And that fact, it didn't get communicated correctly from old team members to the new team members. And if it had, I don't think there'd have been anybody in that room that wouldn't have yelled stop and jumped off the bridge to make it happen.
There were errors made. The pitot heat circuit breaker was disabled, but there was no placard in the cockpit to say no pitot heat. And notices of the configuration were sent around, but here also we probably lacked one step, and that is to know that everybody got the message. It's one thing to send it out, it's another thing to verify everyone has read and understood it. And so that procedure was changed, by the way, so that people ripped off the bottom of the page and sent it back. I've seen it.
Ironically, the X-31 program also may have been a victim of its own success.
I never saw complacency in this team. I went to tech briefs, crew briefs. It was treated very professionally, and in fact, to some extent, it was treated like an experimental airplane every flight. But certainly you have to think that after hundreds of flights, excellent results, and the fact that none of these hazards, these terrible things that you predict could happen, has ever happened, it could lead you to be less sensitive to things that are happening. Maybe just a little bit of the edge comes off.
Those single point failures were identified, and we made some actual changes to the design of the airplane to account for that. And again, that was in 1989. Why all those were there and what the concerns were and how to mitigate them and how to worry about them became We hadn't had any problems with that for 5 years. And I think, again, the complacency just got built into the team. It worked fine. We never had a problem. And those little hairs on the back of your neck weren't geared to stand up when people started having airspeed problems.
Our control rooms used to have a saying on them to prepare for the unexpected and expect to be unprepared. And I think that's a truth in the flight test business, that that we need to keep that in mind continuously. I wish that sign was still up there, because that reminder needs to be enforced all the time.
Well, certainly in the case of the X-31, we were returning to base after 2 exhausting days, 7 flights. Ship 1 was now going into the boneyard, or at least it was being retired from the test program. And so we're finally finished. Is everybody paying attention like they should be? Obviously not.
And while the X-31 program flights were highly successful, they did not include an element that might have helped prime the program team to take the one mitigating action that could have brought the X-31 home safely.
We've debated amongst ourselves whether we actually would have been able to convince anybody to use the fixed gain system, because there was not an obvious need for it. The pilot may have been better prepared when things started to go awry to select fixed gains, but I don't know if we ever really would have done it in that situation, because we didn't have a real problem. We did have a real problem, but it hadn't been diagnosed as a real problem.
On the previous program, the X-29 program, we had the same sort of thing. We had an analog reversion mode, a digital reversion mode, and the normal mode of the airplane. We routinely at every test point selected those backup modes, flew them around, so the pilots were much more familiar and much more comfortable with selecting those modes. On the X-31 program, we never selected those modes intentionally. We only used them when we had a sensor failure or the system told us to select those modes.
On the day of the mishap itself, there were additional links added to the chain. There were unusual weather conditions that created an uncommon and unexpected kind of flight hazard, and the team was working with a flawed hot mic system that kept the chase pilot from hearing critical communications from the X-31 pilot.
So, some links in the chain are already built there. Management links, control room is now talked internally, they've heard some things, they haven't said anything. Some more links are built. We got this chain is building now. The chase pilot didn't hear anything about this, didn't know that he didn't know anything was wrong with the airplane until he saw the airplane pitch up and the pilot jump out. Whereas he could have stopped this anytime.
At any rate, it's a total team concept, and the chase pilot has to be part of that team. The team has to have total communication. So the use of a hot microphone frequency that did not allow the chase pilot to stay up with what was going on with the airplane was essentially keeping me from doing my job, at least at a certain level. And that's one of the things that we changed in the way we do business here at Dryden, is to allow the chase pilots either access to the hot mic or to ensure that all critical communications are transmitted so that all the players are kept up to speed with what's going on. And that was a direct fallout of how the X-31 operation was handled that day.
If one or more of these contributing factors had been caught and addressed prior to January 19th, the chain of events leading up to the accident might have been broken before the flight even took place. Yet there were still opportunities to avoid the mishap, even in the last few minutes of the X-31's flight. So why didn't the team manage to recognize, communicate, and respond to the X-31's pattern of anomalies in time?
So we were seeing inconsistencies between the data from the aircraft system and what we knew of the physics of the problem, that it could not be, that you could not have that airspeed and that angle of attack simultaneously. And for me, I just remember thinking, gosh, I can't wait till we get the data from this flight, because I want to see what's going on. I knew there was an anomaly. We had talked about it between the engineers. We didn't talk about it on the intercom, though. It was sidebar conversations in the control room.
Well, many of us are engineers, and we see an issue. Oh, this is interesting. I wonder what's causing that. And you start thinking about it and trying to figure out what is the answer. In the meantime, the seconds are clicking by. And really the right response is, something's going on I don't understand. Let's call a halt here and let's just figure it out.
We should have, at the first call of an airspeed failure, puckered up. Whether you're RTB at that point or not, it wouldn't have changed. The kind of failure that was occurring should have triggered a lot of emotion anywhere in the flight envelope.
In the case of any discrepancy, anything that doesn't sound right, feel right, smell right, let's stop and think it over. And I think that kind of attitude has been built in now into the control room, mission control room processes since then.
We were flying lots of flights. At the peak of the program, there would be days when there would be 5 flight days. I think on that particular day, we were only doing 3 flights. And it was the last flight of the day. It was the last flight for the first airplane. And we had completed all the test points for that mission. In addition, we were going through the RTB, or return to base checklist. And at that point, every one of us kind of relaxed. Like I said, what was going through my mind is, I can't wait to get this data. Something funny is going on, and I want to figure it out. And that's another lesson learned, that when we talk about it all the time, the mission's not over till the airplane's on the ground and the engine's shut down. And you see it a lot in the control rooms. We start getting ready to land, and everybody relaxes a little bit. And that's a lesson I've carried with me, is you need to continue the vigilance there in the flight.
Communication is what it's all about. So everybody, we have to have the communication links. We didn't have it to the chase. Hot mic was a contributing factor. We didn't have it in the control room. We discussed things internally, was not transmitted to the pilot. We have to have an environment and built where people can speak up when they think something's wrong. They don't have to be right. If they're concerned, they should be able to speak their mind, put their hand up, and we stop the train. And then we say, no, you weren't right, it's okay. Fine, we go on. We didn't do that. We never stopped the train.
We had a problem, and we didn't stop, not only testing, we didn't stop flying and come home. But you can't stop for every problem. I mean, that's unrealistic. You have problems in flight. The combination that went with that is we didn't understand the severity of the problem. So you have to understand your vehicle and the consequences of failures. And if one of those failures has a serious consequence, you need to stop and come home.
Clearly, there are lessons to be learned in the entire progression of events that led up to the X-31 mishap. And yet, the X-31 program did not end with that crash. The next chapter of its story is an equally important reminder of why flight test remains such a valuable step in proving a concept or technology, despite the hazards that come with the territory. The X-31 had been scheduled to fly at the Paris Air Show in June of 1995. But after the loss of one of the 2 X-31 ships less than 6 months before the show, it seemed an impossible goal.
Having lost the airplane, pretty much everyone thought that's it. Because flying the kind of maneuvers that this airplane can do at 500 feet sounded a lot riskier to me after you lose an airplane. The team really talked a lot about this and decided that it did not want to end this program on a low note. And so we made the decision to press on with the Paris Air Show.
A huge thing to sign up for was to take an airplane that just crashed and to turn it around to go do a low altitude, high angle attack flight demonstration. That took a lot of guts on everybody's part and a lot of good engineering work to make that happen.
We actually flew the X-31 84 days after the mishap. This required the board to reach its conclusions, to write a report, for the team to react to all of the issues and problems and contributing factors brought up, solve the problem, and get it into an airplane and get it qualified for first flight. It was all done in 84 days. It does tell you about the quality of the team.
Right. Valkyrie coming.
Totally different airplane, which will demonstrate a remarkable flying ability. it is the X-31 technology demonstration.
You know, after the mishap, I think the program made a spectacular recovery and made one of the finest appearances ever at the Paris Air Show. The airplane did things that no other airplane could do. The Russians had demonstrated post-stall maneuvers with the Cobra, but it was really an open-loop maneuver. They pulled back on the stick and then you flew out of it at the end. Whereas the X-31 just demonstrated the ability to control all axes of the airplane, pitch, roll, and yaw simultaneously while operating at the extremes of the flight envelope.
So, fantastic air show, absolutely the most spectacular I've ever seen, and I saw every one of them. And I stood with the crowd on some of them, and I was in the control tower on others, and out right underneath it at other times. But to be with the crowd and watch, even hardened veterans, military, had no concept of what it could really do, and seeing it was jaw-dropping for the crowd. It was spectacular.
The announcement that the X-31 was next to fly, as you look down the row of chalets, you see all the people coming out of the chalets, out against the railing to watch the flight.
If the events leading up to the X-31's mishap are a reminder of how much vigilance is required in order to mitigate the risks inherent in a flight test program, the X-31's Paris Air Show performance was a reminder of why those risks are still worth undertaking.
Flight test of all kinds is inherently dangerous. There are risks involved in it. Never can you or anybody else bring it to zero. Well, you can. That's keep the airplane in the hangar. Don't fly. Well, if you don't fly, you don't move forward, you don't discover, you don't prove things. So you need to take some risks, but you need to do it in a controlled fashion.
The reason we spend time on looking at these accidents is that there aren't many accidents. We don't lose many airplanes in flight research activities at Dryden. We haven't over the years. And so when you do have one, you better learn everything about it. In fact, you should do the same thing for close calls.
The lessons to be learned. Don't assume that they've been learned. We can always, at every new group, we'll have to learn the same lessons, and you don't want to do it the hard way with an accident. Safety is everybody's business. Flight test safety is everybody's business on the team, and there are no processes. You have to have processes, but there are no perfect processes that will not require good judgment from all levels of the program.
If you're a program that's been operating for a long time, potentially, you've got a lot of turnover, you're in your mature years, all your documentation is years old, maybe you better make sure that all your new people are as good as your old people, that you've reviewed your documentation and it's still correct and you all understand it, and that what you're doing today still makes sense from how you started. So maybe one of those, if you're in that area, you ought to take a look at yourself.
It always is clear what you should do after the fact, or should have done rather, and nobody thinks it's ever going to happen to them. To lose judgment, to lose this communication link, to not do the right things.
So what is the message? What is the message for the team? It may mean that I am a part of the chain, and that if I don't catch this, and if other people don't catch their mistakes, we will run through the entire chain and lead to a mishap. So it means that every individual in the program from beginning to end, no matter what the job is, from the highest level job to the lowest level job in terms of detail, they have to take it very seriously. And that's a message that you have to keep promoting, pronouncing, and explaining. It sounds trite, but everybody is responsible for safety. If you think some safety office analysis is going to find the things, they won't. Mishaps can occur everywhere, but the point is you have to fly safely, but fly.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth, and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the DroneScapes YouTube channel.
If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. And as always, thank you for watching.